politics and money and impact for the community. So today we're about to get into it again, a similar line, but with this idea, we're engaging on the black community. So yeah, you know, so while we're gonna engage the community as a whole, but specifically the African American community, libertarians, black libertarians, and how this all interacts, what it all means, kind of go from there. So, I this is actually my first time engaging about a specific party itself, and its relation to not just my current community, but just the African American community in general. Um, so before I begin, I am not a certified historian on political parties or the Libertarian Party. With that being said, I have been found often at times proclaiming myself a libertarian. Now, for clarity, that does not mean that I am a card carrying member of the Libertarian Party. I do openly admit, or disclose rather, I do openly disclose that I did vote for Gary Johnson in the 2016 election, but that doesn't mean that automatically the Libertarian Party has my vote this year. So I actually do have a guest coming on in a little bit. I just want to kind of set the stage for it again. So libertarianism, what is it? What does it mean? I find that libertarianism, more so than the other parties you may have heard about, it's closer to religion. Um, Hold up, someone's telling me no audio. How about now? Still no audio? Can't hear a damn thing. I've just been talking to myself. Someone give me some ping back. Let me know if you got something here now. Hello, hello. I think we might be good now. Okay. So, apologize about that. Let's back her on up. So, today we're talking about libertarians, African Americans, African American libertarians, how these things all interact, how they all interact. I have a guest coming on later today. Um, so, just so you can say you saw it, you're going to have two self alleged black libertarians in the same room at the same time, or the same stream at the same time, and actually living in the same area. So, we're not going to say that this is the first time that we've done it, that blacks have ever done it, but we actually live adjacent to each other. I live here in Kenosha County. He lives here in Racine County. I live in the city of Kenosha. He lives in the city of Racine. So, just setting this up here before I bring in my guest, the idea is I want to present, first off, I'm not a certified historian on libertarianism or political parties. I do self-allege to be a libertarian. I voted for Gary Johnson in 2016. Just fast and furious way. You might be like, if you're blaming me for Trump going into office now, I was, I really thought that the main election was a done deal. So my personal attitude was, I want to build up any efforts to destroy the two-party system. So I didn't just vote libertarian just to vote for libertarianism. I do have affinities and interest in that idea and that concept. But I was kind of like, I'm gonna cast my vote for Johnson to get more presence and more stature for the Libertarian Party. But I know he's not going to win. That was my attitude when I cast the vote. So we all saw how that day went, and those next 3.5 years. But I digress. So libertarianism is new, but it's not new. Depending on who you talk to, well, depending on their level of academic education, You'll be told that libertarianism started anywhere from 1920, 1940s, or more public specter, probably I'd say late 1960s, 1970s, when it started being adapted by your Goldwater Republicans, So specifically, where we'd like to try to center the conversation is, well, we'll talk about what is a libertarian. Let me do that first. Now, again, take these all as opinions. Do not write these down as facts. So you can say it sounds good to me, but please verify it yourself. What is a libertarian? I'm going to say such a question is the equivalent, more so than the other political parties. So more so than asking what is a Democrat or what is a Republican. When you ask what is a libertarian, I argue it's the equivalent of asking what is a Christian. Libertarianism, when you get into it, while they might not have the numbers, I find it a very diverse, very highly varied ecosystem of like-minded but strong differences. So if you think about Christianity, you have both Mormons and everyone who's not a Mormon. So that's very similar, but one group has 2 books, the others don't. Well, unless you count Catholics, but they don't count at the same level, but I digress. But even like that, you have Catholics, and you have everybody else, saints, that idea, a human representative as a direct conduit to God. So while they all have the same book under the Christian umbrella, there's some strong differences that make them different. And while they have more in common than they do differences, you're normally hearing them engage, unfortunately, publicly on the differences. Libertarians are the same way. I mean, if you can't afford to go to an MMA bout, just go to a libertarian function where everyone claims to be a libertarian. You're bound to get entertained with some good action. I am going to provide a fast and furious list of types of libertarians. This is not an official list. This is actually more a social media list than anything. So let's start with in fact, just to make this double sure that you can only hold me accountable, I'm going to take existing terms, but put the name Ray in front of it. So you can only blame me, no one else. So I'm going to start with Market God Libertarian. This is a libertarian that they believe that the only thing that we should be talking about in community is the markets. Very big fans of the markets. Let the markets decide. Let the markets decide. Markets are the only government we need. On primary look, this may have benefits, and I agree the markets should have a lot of decision, but we're going to get into it later with the African American community about the dangers of such an approach, at least for their specific interest of saying, let the markets decide. You have other libertarians that are, if you think about the market, it's about freedom, absence of being restricted by others. The idea is that central authority, how could central authority ever take better care of you than you take care of yourself? The best form of government is self-government. There's a version or section of libertarianism I'll call Ray's Bordertarian. These are individuals that believe in absolute, complete freedom. Everyone do what you want to do. Go where you want to go. Private rights, provided that you are an American citizen. Meaning, not this extended to all people, but extended to people who have citizenship. Another version, and these are not meant to be complimentary. These we're kind of bouncing all over the place. You have, let's go to extreme. There's people like me who argue that anarchists are an extreme form of libertarianism. Now, unfortunately, in the general public sphere, when you hear the term anarchist, people, for some reason, think, oh, crazy people doing crazy things to themselves and to others. Anarchy doesn't necessarily mean that. It just can mean possibly we have no laws put on us by others. I'll do my thing, you do your thing. That technically could be anarchy, where there's no social contracts. There's no requirements of me to you that I did not agree to. So if let's say that's our extreme, anarchist. On the other side, within the libertarian spectrum, let's just call that libertarianism. In the middle, we're going to call it raise minarchists. Minarchists, like mini anarchists. They don't want full anarchy, meaning they don't want you to be completely having a world where you solely alone decide everything in your world and you are on your own. What might that look like? That might look like a world where you have a centralized government, but maybe the only purpose of that centralized government is to have a national defense. Kind of, so coming back to the bordertarian, a little similar, where the bordertarian and the I only want military for central government overlap is they both have a degree of central authority. Where they may have differences is someone could say, hey, the only thing I want government to do is do national defense, which means they don't want the national government doing immigration. A bordertarian could possibly say, hey, I don't even want a national military. If something happens, we'll stand up militias. But I want a gate around the nation to keep other people out from this paradise. And you could have a mixture of the two. These are big picture concepts. The idea is, why am I giving my money through taxation to the government when the government is idiots and I can always make better decisions? That's the premise. And not even always make better decisions. On average, I will make better decisions for myself than the government will. That's the premise of many libertarians. So you may ask, hey, I've been seeing you talk to your community. You've been pretty engaged. Why are you doing this then if you're a libertarian? So here's how I reconcile my libertarian leanings with how I actually live and the things that I say. For me, and we're going to get into this later, it's part of the problem, the difficulty of libertarianism is that everyone, I truly believe, the closer you are to the source, the more likely any solutions you come up with have of working. So if you look at one of the things that makes America great, let's take our patenting system. If you have an idea, you can go and patent it. And if it's an original idea, you can get the patent, you control it. Those individual rights, you own your idea, you get the benefit from it. This encourages people like with ideas and thoughts to go and do more. That's an example of a good impact of decentralized authority. I remember reading an old story in Roman times. Man, I can't remember that emperor's name. Started with a T. He wasn't a nice guy. Under his rule, when you had an idea, you had to bring it to the king. So when the story goes that there's an individual who had an idea and he brings it to the king, and It was basically a shatterproof mug. So he comes before the emperor, not the king, comes before the emperor and he says, "Hey, I've built a mug that doesn't break. I'd like to sell this to people because that's a big deal, mugs that break." And the the emperor, he says, "Show me." And the man demonstrates that. And he confirms that, in fact, he's built this awesome mug that doesn't break. And the response of the emperor was to have the man killed. When explaining himself, the emperor stated that that man would put so many businesses out of business. There's the glass makers. There's the people who pick up the glass after it's been broken. There's the people who remelt the glass and sell it to glass makers, all this stuff. So for that reason, he had the man killed. It wasn't about letting the markets decide. It was about protecting the producers. That's the point of that story. Libertarianism on the market side is the idea of Frederick Bastiat, one of my favorite libertarian writers, economists, France, 1840s. He stated that the difference, when in doubt, when you are in doubt, side with the consumer, not the producer. Side with the consumer. So what does that look like? Let's talk tariffs, for example. Tariffs is you don't like outsiders coming in and competing with your businesses. So you have a barrier that if you're an outside business, you have to pay additional money, which in order for them to sell their product, they have to pass that cost off to the user, to the consumer. So our native guys, they make something and it costs $5, but the value is a little bit less. These guys from out of town, they sell a better product and they only charge $2. So we put a tariff of $8 so that minimum they have to sell their product for $10. That's what a tariff does. Now, because the external product is $10 and ours was, I forgot the number, I said 4 or 5. What short-term thinkers say is, hey, that makes us richer because the people who live here get the sales. What you don't realize, though, is you are paying an inferior product quality to stay alive. So the customer is getting less bang for their buck. Now, the company who's protected by the tariff, despite claims from Republicans, they don't do better. So just imagine it. Let's say I tell you I'm going to put a tariff to keep out other people who try to do your job, meaning other people who try to do your job instead of you, they only get paid $2. The job is worth 10, but they only get paid $2 if they do the job. So they basically decide not to take your job because they only get $2 and you get 10. Because the system blocks out competition for you, do you think you work to get better at your job? Or do you think you kind of enjoy the moment? Or, do you think you're kind of like, hey, I love this. This is awesome. They basically decide, I'll just keep going with this period. The latter is actually what happens more often than not. What you find more often is that individuals, when they're protected, they work less. I think it's a good time to start interjecting. Man, everything's acted up today. I think it's a good time. So if anyone's trying to share this or anything like that, it's now made public, so you can engage it on Facebook. Sorry about that. This is a point now where good time to start interjecting. How does this fit into the African American community? So while libertarian was spoken of, and academic circles and high society, maybe decades before, Where libertarianism really started smacking into the face of the African American community was actually through Republicans. I'd say you could start with Nixon, actually, where you started seeing this attitude of you don't help the poor and the disadvantaged by giving them stuff. You help them by getting out of their way. That's a good way to say it. The idea is we can help them if we just get out of their way. Let's leave them alone. So let's talk about African Americans. This is what a libertarian from the 60s or 70s would say. Or maybe even now, you'll run into such folks. If we just leave African Americans alone, then they can be prosperous if that's what they want. It doesn't sound like a bad thing when you think about it, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. And it's where we're going to jump into the idea of normative versus positive. What it should be versus what it is. Libertarianism, parts of it, were very well liked by Republicans, still are to this day. Some of the parts they really liked was the idea of small government. Small government. Government is overreaching. Government is doing too much and they don't help anybody. So let's shrink the government. So you start seeing this again, Nixon and Reagan, those times. They're separate times, even though they were overlapped. One was a governor, one was a president. President-wise, they did not overlap. They went one by another. And you see this becoming a very Republicans really liking this. Hey, we like these libertarian ideas. And they would say that, hey, these are great ideas, let's adopt them. And they'd actually end up poaching libertarian supporters to the Republican Party. The problem is this. During these years, libertarianism was applied only in certain parts of society, only to certain people. So defund the government. Republicans love that. The problem is they weren't defunding farmers. They weren't defunding corporations. They were only defunding the poor, the inner city, the minority. Nixon, he brought in some Black Panther members to the White House, and he gave a press conference and he said, my White House, we support strong, individual Black power. What did that mean? What that meant was Nixon defunded so many programs, so many money strains going to the inner city. Just the inner city. So yes, they put up programs to teach the Black side of town how to write a business plan. Just like they had it for the white side of town. What's the difference? The program for the white side of town came with money for your business after you finished the program. So the Black side of town was just teaching a whole bunch of people how to write up a business plan, but nobody would give them money. So much so during these times that the number one lender to the African community, African Americans business community. So I'll say that again. The number one lender to the African American business community during these times was the Italian mafia. Another thing that Republicans adopted was the idea of we are staunchly anti-racist policy. So that's what you see happening under the Nixon era and then going into through the Reagan era for conservatives. And you see that to this day. The stance is we are 100% against official establishment racism. We won't tolerate it. Equally so, we are 100% against engaging racism. This is why what you see, we don't want affirmative action. We don't want hate crime laws. We don't want anything acknowledging racism, meaning we're not going to do it, but we're not going to engage and try to prevent it either. We'll simply say no establishment. You'll hear terms like this from libertarians, like freedom of association. Meaning, hey, freedom of association. Associate who I want to associate with. You might be saying, hey, that's pretty reasonable. I like that. I only want to associate with people I want to associate with. If I don't like that guy, I don't like that guy. It's because I swear to you, I've been out at events. I've met libertarians. That could mean a guy says, I don't want to hang out with people who drink White Claw. Or he might be saying, I don't want to hang out with black people or white people. So basically what it is, it's an attempt to use libertarianism as an objective reason to justify discrimination. It's not racism. It's just freedom of association. I prefer to associate with people who look like me. Now, where's the disconnect there, in my opinion? One is talking about who you personally engaged with, and the other is talking about who society treats the same way or not. There's lots of people I cannot like and not ask society to make them caste citizens or second class citizens in a caste. So the African American community hasn't had much direct interaction with the Libertarian Party, but the interaction they have, I would say since the 60s, it hasn't been that great. So here we are now. You have individuals like me saying, hey, I'm a libertarian. So how do I reconcile that? Well, I start off by pointing out I use the word I. I am a libertarian. What that means is I apply it to my approaches. I am not a big fan of forcing you to do anything you don't want to do, with the exception of respecting other people. So I support forcing you to respect human life. Human life. So do whatever you want to do, provided it doesn't hurt anybody else. Now, that might sound pretty straightforward and easy, but even that's difficult. So someone might say, okay, do whatever you want to do, provided you don't hurt anyone else. So don't punch people, don't kick people. Yes, clear-cut ones. But then it gets a little gray. If I run a nuclear plant behind your house and the runoff goes into your drinking water, but I have nothing to do with your drinking water. I didn't tell you to have pipes running underneath your house. That was your choice, brother. You could collect the water from the rain. Did I hurt you or did you hurt you? This is a conversation, not that exact analogy, but this is a conversation that comes up often regarding what does it mean to do harm? How about me and you are in a business transaction? So I sell nuclear material, you buy nuclear material. We always meet in an open park that no one owns, and we test it by sprinkling some nuclear dust into the local water. And if me and you are both happy, we trade money. You get the goods, I get the money. The people that live there, how do we measure their cost? They weren't involved in the original business transaction. They were unwilling participants. How do we get them compensated? These are questions that are debated back and forth with libertarianism. So let's imagine you have some libertarians going to the black side of town. How do they normally talk? Well, I wouldn't say normally. What are those things I might expect them to say? I expect them to say, hey, we're for gun rights. You guys should have your guns. Also, a big one right now, they're seizing the moment. We're for qualified immunity. What is qualified immunity? All these police shootings, they will go away if police have to be individually insured, and if they shoot someone, they have to pay for it themselves. This is a big sell within the Libertarian Party. Me personally, I think that's a lot of high hopes. If people aren't afraid of going to jail for shooting somebody while wearing a badge, why would you expect they care about having to get insurance and having to pay if they shoot somebody? Even if somebody says, well, no, we want this personal bonding, individual bonding, almost like a professional license. And if you shoot somebody, then you lose your bonding, you can't get another job. Think about what you're saying. You're almost like so maybe your cat doesn't have 9 lives, but your cat definitely has more than one. All right, guys, you got to get this licensure. If you shoot somebody, you're going to lose your license. I argue that the mentality still infers a misaligned linking between the value of a life, often a Black life, and other inanimate things, other non-living things. Me personally, I don't want to hear that, hey, those 5 cops that shot your family, just so you know, they lost their jobs and they had to do a payout to the insurance company. So you're good. And they can't work anywhere else again. I don't think I'd be feeling that I won. I'd still be feeling like some people got away with murder. Right now, you have the community yelling, defund the police. That was very funny to me because you got the Black Lives Matter population yelling, defund the police, defund the police. And you got libertarians coming out the woodwork like, I mean, they're pumped. They're like, you had me at defund. You can often come to the same place for different reasons. There is a libertarian, not all, there is a libertarian who's saying, I love the idea of defunding the police. Less taxes. While the Black community is saying defund the police so they stop killing us. This is often a critique of mine in libertarian circles. Even though they've never had any chance of winning the presidency so far to date, when they engage the general public and the general public asks about libertarianism, they're like, oh, you're just normal, stupid sheeple. You wouldn't understand. So what you have is, not only is it hard for people to understand why this is something that would work for them, equally so, usually the people proselytizing are jerks. They really are jerks. African Americans have not got as much as they should, given what they put into this country. So it's a hard sell for African Americans to see decades of it going one way. And when it looks like they finally might get a full seat at that money table, then being told, hey, let's tear down that table. So these are very complicated ideas that if you try to make it simple, you're going to lose more people than you gain. But yeah, let's get into it. I got my guy here, so let's bring him on in.
Howdy.
How we doing, sir?
Doing all right. I had to put it on my phone. I have an iPad tablet,
Okay.
and I don't have Chrome on that.
Oh, all right.
So Yeah,
Well, it's
right
coming
now.
through.
Okay, well, right now it'll be on the phone. I'm just now coming out of the bank, handling some business in the bank. They're
Just
about as
like a libertarian, always about the business.
yes, they're as fast as molasses in January.
All right. So why don't you introduce yourself to the people and yeah, let's just start letting them hear a conversation about libertarianism, African Americans and African American libertarians.
Okay. Well, my name is Mac Platt. Um, Stationed in the city of Racine, Wisconsin. Uh, I am the chairperson and executive director of a political action committee called People United for Responsible Government Incorporated. Our acronym we pronounce as PURGE. So one of the things we like to say is we're going to purge City Hall. How successful we may be, I guess, depends on others who join with us. Um, as far as libertarianism is concerned, I myself, I don't belong to the Libertarian Party, but I do pretty much align with most of the libertarian tenets. I'm a believer in freedom. I'm a believer in very little government interference into the lives of private citizens. Um, so that's pretty much me in a nutshell. So we can get into our conversation.
Okay, sir. So I was just kind of giving some rough, fast and furious back history of the Libertarian Party and kind of lightly digging into how libertarianism has so far to date interacted with the African American community. So maybe let's start there. From your vantage, from your point of view, and let's separate some two things moving forward. So there's the actual, let's call it the LPC. There's the actual Libertarian Party, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's libertarian ideals. So
Mm-hmm.
let's keep it simple and go with those two. And let's just take it even simpler. Let's put the party aside for a second. Let's just talk about libertarian ideas. What is your vantage of the current of to date libertarian ideas and their interaction with the African American community in America? Well, clearly in America.
Um, so uh, what I have found is that in the African American community, there's a lot of misconception among many people about what the Libertarian Party is and what it stands for. Um, Many African Americans that I've encountered have dismissed libertarianism, small L libertarianism, as I guess rhetoric used as an excuse to support the mistreatment of minorities.
And I
And
and I
you know,
want to get I want to get into what the community thinks it is. From your
mhm.
point of view, what has it actually been?
From my point of view, small L libertarianism has basically been uh, an advocacy of property rights. Um, we as human beings, either by virtue of our humanity, if you're not quite the spiritual type, or we as human beings by virtue of our creator, we have certain rights that we were endowed with or that we come with. Um, and they all stem from having a property right in our own person. I own me, and because I own me, I get to decide what gets done with me and anything that extends from me. So my thoughts, my labor, when I mix my labor with unclaimed resources, that becomes my property, which is an extension of who I am and what I've done. So I get to dispose of that property as I see fit. Having a property right in my body means I get to use it as I see fit, so long as I am not violating someone else's right to their property right in their own body. So if I want to ingest a specific plant, if I want to ingest a specific chemical, um, from a libertarian standpoint, no one can impede me from doing that. The only thing that I can be impeded from is interfering with someone else's right to do as they see fit with their own property and their own body. And so that's what libertarianism means to me. It's basically a system of voluntarism, um, from what I have seen.
And I didn't ask that, but I'm glad you said that. So you really answered the question, what is libertarianism? So I think that was very important. So I apologize for not asking that first. So
Oh,
um,
that's fine.
so that what is libertarianism? But I want to make it clear here. Had I asked somebody what is the Bill of Rights in 1820, they could have told me certain language. And then I could have asked, what is the Bill of Rights to an African American? And that would have been a different conversation. It's nothing to an African American. They're a slave.
Right.
So, libertarianism, I like your definition. You said it a lot more fluid than I would have been able to. I guess so. The follow on question is, what is it to African Americans historically? Do we have history saying it's been the same for them? What you just said, that's what it's been for African Americans, or kind of like the Bill of Rights from 1787, 1776, 1787, all the way to 1860. Honestly, let's keep it real. 1965, a
And even
different,
beyond.
yeah, a different thing. So, and I'm glad you said that even beyond, because, you know, anything we're about to say, this is not a unique characteristic of libertarianism. I just think it's important to walk through these steps. So we heard from you the undiluted, the pure form of libertarianism. For America, when you put the lens that looks at an African American, what, in your opinion, has libertarianism been historically?
Um, like I said, it's been like an excuse to mistreat African Americans, um, in
And
particular.
before you came on, I did, just so you know, I did share my perception of historical analysis where bits and pieces of libertarianism were utilized by conservatives to
Yes,
justify defunding
yes,
parts of town, not defunding certain people. So
yeah.
I did kind of touch on that earlier. We can definitely did that too, but go on.
Um, that's pretty much it. Historically, what it has been like is an excuse to say, "Hey, um, you don't get any of these goodies. You don't uh, get to benefit from protections of the government because, after all, we have a right to not associate with you, and so we're going to exercise our right not to associate with you. And through that, then you don't get this benefit or you don't get this goodie, so on and so forth. That's what it has looked like for me. Um, Even beyond that, even when they do treat libertarianism correctly, African Americans historically have been left out of the conversation because, like in the 1859 Dred Scott decision, oh, you're not human, so you don't have human rights. So even though, we say all men are created equal, the definition of men does not include African Americans or slaves or whatever. It's the same thing with the Roe versus Wade decision in 1973. We have here in this country protections for persons, but according to the Supreme Court, the word person does not include the unborn. So that clears the way to do what what happens to the unborn. And regardless of how you feel about abortion, the fact remains that's what happened because the unborn have been uh, defined out of personhood. Then they don't have the same um, rights and protections as those who are defined in personhood. And so you see that same kind of dynamic happen with African Americans and libertarianism or classical liberalism in this country, pre 1865. And then after 1865, you had citizens, first class citizens who were, the white individuals, and then second class citizens who were the former slaves. Because you're not a first class citizen, there are certain rights and privileges that you don't get to enjoy, that first class citizens get to enjoy, and so we had to fast forward into 1965, and, in some circles, we're still kind of getting rid of the residue of that. But it took us another 100 and so years to get everyone to pretty much recognize that we are all human. And when the Constitution says, or excuse me, when the Declaration of Independence does say all men, men being used as the ambiguous, non-gendered term, meaning all human beings are created equal, no matter what their skin color is, no matter what their ancestry is, no matter what their nationality is, or what have you.
So you were kind of getting to it. Let's go ahead and jump into it. So I think me and you are on the same accord that the African American community is apprehensive about the Libertarian Party, and
Yes.
and I think we agree that they're apprehensive because of the misapplications or even mislabeling of libertarian ideals. So, I mean, so I'll speak myself. I don't think the African American community is crazy. I don't think they're crazy for saying, hey, the last fools that rode up in here started talking that crazy talk. They defunded all our programs and redirected that money towards the other side of town. They kept charging us taxes. Our taxes didn't go down. We just got less on the black side of town. So you can skip rocks with that libertarianism talk. I don't think the black community is crazy if that is their first reaction when the LPC roll up in town.
Right. Yeah, it's unfortunate that the what is it? The Barry Goldwater Republicans, and even today the Republican Party, they use certain ideals or certain tenets of libertarianism. They don't actually believe in them, but they use the terminology because it gets results. That's something that occurs in both political parties. They don't use terms because of what they mean. They use terms based on the results that they get. And so, you have a misapplication of certain things and a misunderstanding of certain terms and certain concepts. And so by the time someone like you or someone like me comes along to, explain these things to individuals, they're not hearing us. Or they're hearing us, but they're not listening to us. It's one of those womp, womp, womp kind of things. Excuse me, I got to put my seatbelt on.
So here's one of the things that, so here's my personal belief, concern, fear, call it what you want. I think if people were a different thing on average, libertarianism would be the way. I don't think that libertarianism is for most people, and therefore I have a hard time seeing how to apply it. I'm going to give some examples. It requires a level, too often I hear libertarianism spoken of in terms of rights. Only, rights only. To where if I try to even use the word responsibility, a guy jumps up and yells, I never agreed to that social contract. They won't even engage.
Right.
Responsibility is a bad word. Outside of maybe I won't kill you. But the idea of externality costs to others, I find a low level of maturity for that discussion inside libertarian ranks. To the point. So to the point, it's a you'll hear that. I am staunchly against institutional racism. Staunchly against it, Ray. I am equally against doing anything about it.
Which, like, well, how can you staunchly be against it if you are against doing anything about it? Now, I can understand you being against people being forced to do something against their will, especially if their inaction is not a violation of somebody's rights. But don't sit and claim the high road, philosophically or, um, what do you want to call it? Egalitarian, from an egalitarian standpoint, you can't claim the moral high road. You can only claim the moral road such that I haven't initiated force or fraud against anybody. But if you're still holding these repugnant opinions of individuals that are based on bad data or no data, then even though you haven't aggressed against anyone, your worldview and your opinion of individuals, which is based on bad data, it invalidates your position in the eyes of other people who are observing you. If you understand what I'm saying.
No, I'm tracking. Let's run through some examples.
Okay, go ahead.
A guy goes, the federal government won't give me any of that sweet tax money if I don't hire black people. That's a violation of my rights by libertarian principle. Do you agree with him? Yes or no?
First and foremost, let's back it up. Where did the government get that money from?
Let's say they got it from taxation, including a portion from him. Not all from him, but he threw money into the pot. So more of it's coming from other people's pockets than it is his. How about that?
Right. Okay. And from a libertarian standpoint, the government has aggressed against him and others to obtain that money. There's no money that the government has that it gets by, its own work or anything like that. Any money that a government gets, it gets from aggressing against other individuals. So,
well,
let's
say they borrow it, because all the money, I'll just say this, the average American, all the money they spend, they didn't make it. So it's possible to have money that you didn't earn. So let's say, and not take. So let's say America is just overextended on credit, and they're taking credit and giving out money to people who show a diverse hiring. And that person says they are violating me by saying I only get some of that money if I hire more diverse. Do we think they violate?
I look at it like this. Who's the guarantor on those loans? And if it's just the full faith and credit of the United States, what is that based on? But let's just say, for instance, it's based on forcible taxes that have to pay back the loan. Okay, so in one way or another, the government is going to aggress against people to get the money to pay back the loans or to have the money, outright as taxes. There's going to be aggression. I look at it like this. At a minimum, if he feels like that is a violation of his rights, he should have a return of his money that the government forcefully extracted from him. And in order to get his money back and the government not aggress against him anymore, he should have the option to totally disengage and not participate in the government system. If he if he has the option to completely disengage from the government system in exchange for him not being aggressed against and having his taxes taken, then fine. But if he does not have an option to disengage, but yet his money is taken from him and used in a way that he doesn't agree, then he's been aggressed against. His rights have been violated.
Okay.
If he were to take more money than what he put in for whatever purpose, because he hired a certain number of black individuals, then he is now aggressing against other people because who don't agree with that type of program.
Well, America historically.
Yeah. Do I think that some people who are less fortunate could benefit from people who are more fortunate? I do. Do I think that if you are more fortunate, or you just put in the hard work, and somebody else, they put in hard work, but a tornado hit their house, or there was a freak earthquake, or an elephant ran through it, or whatever that was released from the zoo. You as the person who worked for the cash, you have the option to say whether or not you want to help them. For the government to say you will help them, and if you don't, we're going to make you help them even more, and if you sufficiently resist, we will violently take you and cage you, and if you resist the caging, we will kill you. Okay, to say all that, that is a violation of that person's right. Okay, they have every right to decide how their resources that they obtained are to be used.
Okay,
Now,
so
if they, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
let me try to step somewhere here then with you, because you're now making me think a direction I haven't actually engaged, at least not mentally, in a while. So government shouldn't force you to do something you don't want to do, you or your money.
Well,
I mean, that doesn't
first of
harm others. And if it doesn't harm others, shouldn't force you.
um, first and foremost, if the government can't force you to do something, it is no longer government. Government is downright force. I believe that was Washington that said that. Um, and another one, I forget who said it, but government is downright force. And whenever that force is used for nefarious ends, and I'm paraphrasing, the people are ruined.
So if the government is not influencing you to do something you would not do absent their influence, how about that?
Okay, so say that one more time.
What we're trying to get to here is I'm trying to bring this back to, if we go off the idea that a libertarian, I'm trying to find out where does it fit? Because if a person is the only person in the world, libertarian is extremely easy. What we're trying to reconcile
Yeah.
here is all of us, none of us built America. So you were born into something that was built by a lot of people. You're born into it.
Yes.
You're inheriting a lot of things that are not natural. We're not talking trees and air here. You're talking things that were
Right.
built by the efforts of others. So
Mm-hmm.
while, yes, you did not ask to be born here, these
You're
things
here.
still have a cost. So
Right.
so let's start, baby. You're not a businessman, you're a baby. You're a baby libertarian. What should it look like? Should it be okay, state, because you're a child, let's just keep it simple. Because you're a child, benefit of the doubt, you don't know. But when you turn 18, should it be you get a choice, turn in your US citizenship, or you consent to paying into this thing that you are benefiting from? That, I mean, let's be honest, I don't care how much money you make, you could have never built America that you enjoy today on your own. No one could, no one on average. Yeah, you got Elon Musk and all that, but the average American could not have been born in the woods and hustled hard and created a mini America to the level of benefits that they enjoy now in this country. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say here, on average.
Okay.
So the question is, this collective, because let's call it America a collective. This collective that's providing all these things you never could have done on your own is saying that you don't just get that for free. To what extent is reasonable or appropriate to say this is what you should do to continue having, I'm gonna use the word license, to continue having license to this world, this particular stuff. Again, not the air, not the fish, not the dirt. This thing that makes America America versus Turkmenistan.
um. Okay, you're really challenging me to put this in terms that won't just be going over people's heads. Um, will you, me personally, I want to look back into the history was this country built because of the government? Was it built immaterial and the government was immaterial? Or was it built despite the government? And, those are the questions that need to be answered first.
I like that. Was it built because or despite? I like that. I think we can stick with people on that. Let's stick there.
Yeah.
African American slave labor was up to 60% of GDP up to the war.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're talking about the war between the states.
Say again?
You're talking about the war between the states, the Civil War.
Yes. So up until that point, slave labor, just for cotton alone, 60% of GDP.
Oh, wow.
Well, actually, cotton, tobacco, and sugar, 60% of GDP. So let's start with your question. Did slavery happen with the help or because of government or despite government?
Well, if you look into the Constitution, which basically laid out the blueprint for how the government would form and operate, it mentioned slaves. So it presupposed slavery's existence. It presupposed its pre-existence to the current constitutional government, and I use constitutional in quotes. It even went so far as to claim slavery's personhood for purposes of representation as 3/5 that of those who got to participate in the government. And so slavery, I believe, happened. Well, slavery happens despite government. There are pockets of slavery, okay, but not on a wide or grand scale where it's part of 60% of the gross domestic product. That, I believe, happened because of the tacit endorsement of government. If the government never endorsed slavery, if it was indifferent to it, I don't think it would have risen to that level, but I think there would have been a significant amount. If government was actively against slavery, you might have the pockets like how we have now, because government is against slavery except for the punishment of breaking the law, or punishment for crimes. You have little pockets of slavery, but nothing like what we saw pre 1865.
Right.
And so
the prison complex is not 60% of the GDP.
Yeah. Even with it being legal for the punishment of crime, it doesn't rise to what it was in 1865. It just doesn't. And so our country was built. You have to acknowledge that this country was built on the labor of slaves. And because of that, there is something owed to those slaves who were forced to provide their labor free of charge. They were aggressed against. Because they were aggressed against, their labor was stolen. They are to be, according to libertarian principles, they are to be made whole. And the aggressor also must pay a punitive penalty for the aggression, so as to incentivize others not to engage in the same aggression. Now, people like to say there's no slaves alive today, and there's no slave holders alive today for American slaves and American slave holders. So then the next step is, now you need to find the descendants of the slaves so that they can benefit from the estate of their ancestors. And whoever it was that stole their labor, the estate of those individuals who stole the labor of the slaves, that estate needs to make the estate of those who had their labor stolen whole. Okay?
So you're saying in your opinion, the weight of this being resolved, you're kind of talking beneficiary to beneficiary. So the beneficiaries of slavery have a score to settle, have a debt, a punitive. You actually had two parts: have a debt to settle with the descendants, the rightful heirs of that labor, is because it's mostly labor. That's where it occurred.
Mhm.
Now
Mhm.
let now you kind of I'm going to suspend your talk because you haven't used the word, but you're in reparation territory. So um, you haven't used the word, but that's where you're dancing. I want to back up though. I'm walking
Okay.
into the black side of town and I say, hey, libertarianism is for you. And they say, explain. And I say, libertarian is for you because, all right. They asked me, what do I have to do to become a libertarian? I'm like, oh, to become a libertarian, you just got to be about the Constitution. Let's say I said that. You just got to be about the
Mhm.
Constitution. And let's say some brother halfway on his game stands up and he says, why would I be about the Constitution when the Constitution is not for me? And he repeats what you
Right.
just said. From the beginning,
Mhm.
that thing declared it's not for me. How do we engage that man? Is he lying?
As it stands, the way that our country is now, he's right. It libertarianism, as it stands now in this country, well, as it relates to our government, he doesn't really uh stand to benefit as it stands from our government. I will say that. Libertarianism is a benefit because it's a part of civilized society. It's a system of relations between entities, party to party, person to person, person to business, business to business, so on and so forth, such that those who aggress against others are assigned the liability of their aggression, and those who are victims receive recompense for their victimization. As it stands now, a murder victim, okay, uh, the person who murdered the victim pays a debt to society, meaning the government. Uh, so not only did the family lose their loved one, but now they get to pay taxes on top of that to house the person who killed their loved one, right? So they're not made whole, and this person isn't suffering a punitive punishment that would incentivize him not to do it again, such that the estate of his victim is a beneficiary of his punitive punishment. In a libertarian society, if John kills Alex, okay, Alex's family has a claim against John. John, okay, has to recompense that family. So whatever John's life may be worth, whether it's financial, and I hate to reduce someone's life to financial worth, but the fact remains, you can't sue somebody to revive someone that they've killed, so you have to look for an alternate way of making the estate of that victim whole. And so John has to recompense Alex's estate and recompense Alex's family, or the beneficiaries of that estate, which would be his family. So um, John would have to make sure that Alex's wife and children that he left behind would be in the same position that they were in before Alex was murdered. He would be on the hook for paying those bills, and so on and so forth. He would be on the hook also for a punitive payment, that something that we would call pain and suffering, because of the pain and suffering that Alex's wife and children experienced as a result of his murder. As it stands now, if John murders Alex, John goes before a government court. A government court gets to decide his guilt or innocence, and then he is put behind bars, pending a hearing for the death penalty, depending on if you're in a death penalty state. If not, he's housed in a house of correction for a number of years that Alex's family now has to pay taxes to maintain. So it's adding uh, insult to that injury. The injury being the loss of Alex through murder, and the insult being they're now paying for the upkeep of their loved one's murderer.
So I've said it myself. I've seen other people speak it. There's often a concern with the libertarian approach being too reactive. If anything, libertarians might say that the other parties, in the name of protecting you, they're too proactive. Basically, they're going to do something before something happens in the name of your security, but at the cost of your freedom. Likewise, you can come up with situations to where libertarianism is we are about your freedom, but yes, the cost is a lower level of security. But if you get killed, rest assured, that person will have to pay a fine. Some people might say that doesn't make me feel any better because I'm dead. So coming back to the libertarian approach to government, let's talk local. We got Racine, we got Kenosha. What would it look like? Let's say on both sides of the house, we got 4 staunch libertarians on aldermanic councils. What will we be expecting from them? Let's walk it out step. Defunding the police, shutting it down. What do you expect?
Well, first and foremost, from a libertarian standpoint, government would be reduced to what it was chartered to do. So in the state of Wisconsin, cities are chartered, and there's a methodology to how they come into existence, how they stay in existence, what they're supposed to do according to law, and that's what they would focus on. The city government would not be playing venture capitalist and pledging multiple millions of dollars of future tax revenue for a project that may or may not come to fruition. And also, if it doesn't come to fruition, the taxpayers being on the hook. But if it does come to fruition, then the private investors being the ones who get the benefit pretty much all by themselves. So socialized costs and privatized profits. That's an issue that we have. From a libertarian standpoint, we would ensure that whatever it is that the people have agreed to cede to the government to do, so what they've released to the government to do. So I've ceded my authority over, putting my garbage in the local landfill. The government's going to do that. I've ceded my authority over protecting the public highways within the city, like Sheridan Road and 60th Street or whatever. That protection will be provided by the police under certain circumstances and according to certain policies and procedures. Okay, from a libertarian standpoint, the only thing that the city would be doing would be those things that the people have ceded to the government to do.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
You got me. So let's say hypothetically, the town of Stankonia, they say we do want our aldermanic council to do venture capitalism. Is that libertarianism? Because they ceded that. We're going to give you some money, and we want you to do venture capitalism. Is that libertarianism?
It's libertarianism. I don't think that it's government, really. When I talk about ceding authority, that's from a voluntary standpoint. Hey, I'm ceding to. There's 10 of us with a total of $1 million. We want entity A to do X, Y, and Z with this money over a period of time, and after that period of time, we expect our money and any profits to be returned to us, less any fees. That's not government. That's just contract. Government, like I said, is force. And government, from a libertarian, classical liberal standpoint, really, government is antithetical to libertarianism. And so to say that you would have
I'm tracking. I like the separation. You're basically separating contract is contract, force is force.
Yes.
Meaning, okay. So, no, that's a good point. So I'll retract back that example here. So how about
So
this one? Again, representing the black community. I see some libertarians come in and they're like, we're going to shrink the government down and stop doing this venture capitalism. And the black community, I say, whoa, whoa, it's taken us 400 years to get to this table. We finally got some people. We were just about to direct that money train to our side of town. Now you want to tear it down. But they're already on the monopoly board. They're already ahead of the game. I will never be able to catch up. They got the benefit of hundreds of years of this structure that you now want to tear down. What are you going to do about that? Is the
and that
answer, hey, that's not our problem? Is the answer, we can't deal with the past? You see where I'm going with this?
and that's why we go back to uh, beneficiary to beneficiary, as you had called it, and you had mentioned it as reparations also, or reparations territory.
I see what you're
Um,
saying. So
so
you're kind of like Joe Biden. She slaps you, slap her back.
um, that's a terrible example.
I still thought it was funny.
Yeah, well, hey, but I don't think it's quite that barbaric. Uh, if I look at it like this, John stole my TV. Um, I have a right to have my TV or a reasonable facsimile given back to me from John, as well as some sort of punitive damages awarded from John for stealing my TV and causing me to be without my TV for the period of time between the time he stole the TV and the time he restored my TV back to me. Okay, that's a simple example, and then you build upon that. Um, our situation when it comes to the African American community is multifaceted, multi-layered. It's like an onion, and it's very complex. But it's not in
Multivariate.
yes,
Going,
but
yeah.
it's not insurmountable. Okay, basically, what you have here is the government or the government apparatus was used by a specific group of individuals to benefit themselves at the expense of these individuals who had their labor stolen from them. And so there is a duty and responsibility to either have that labor paid for back to the person who had the labor stolen from them, or the beneficiaries, descendants, or the estate, what have you, of the ones who had their labor stolen from them has to have that restored back to them. So let's look at it like this. The Carnegie family, for instance, what I'm about to say, I'm not saying is what happened. I'm just using that name as an example. The Carnegie family, they had 10 slaves, and they stole the labor of these 10 slaves for 50 years, from 1815 until 1865. You have to calculate the value of the slave labor that they stole, account for any kind of inflation during that period, and account for inflation from 1865 until when the payment is settled upon in due. And the beneficiaries of the Carnegies, because they benefited from the slave labor, and that's why they're in the station that they're in now with multiple billions or trillions of dollars. Now we have to look at, okay, the labor was stolen, and this is how they benefited because of the stolen labor. That stolen labor plus inflation plus a punitive damage has to be transferred from the Carnegie family to the descendants of those 10 slaves, because the descendants of those 10 slaves, they did not have the benefit of the labor of their ancestors who were paid proper remuneration for their labor, if you get what I'm
So
driving at.
I'm gonna stay in your world now. So
Mm-hmm.
you said it yourself. Hate putting numbers on a person's life, but we're in that room right now. We're in that box.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much.
So so let's say I rob a guy. He's got a lot less education than me. I rob him of $1,500 last month. I take that $1,500, I buy me a share of Tesla. I waited till it jumped up to 2,200 and it split, and then I dumped it. You then come back as a libertarian representing him, and you do your calculations that based on what he would have been able to do had he had his $1,500 normally, what he's capable of, return on investment, I owe him 1,600, but I made 2,200. So I still got $700 for the crime. In all honesty, even if I have to give back my, let's call slavery seed capital, unless you take a very large leap and say, had I not taken his money, he could have learned day trading and done the same thing, which you're not ready to do. So you might, I haven't sat and done the numbers. You might still have a situation where, because opportunities were denied, you have to stick with more conservative numbers. And yes, there may be something provided, but there's still a coin toss how that hashes out. But because they weren't out there picking that cotton themselves and snapping that sugar cane, they were able to read books. They were able to get fancy. I mean, shoot, our credit market was built off this luxury of slavery. That's what shot us up, jumping up monetarily. And not anyone could have done that. You have to be in a certain position for that to have happened. Do you see where I'm going with this? Where even if you make me give that man back his $1,500 plus interest for 2 weeks, you really haven't deterred me from doing it again. I'll rob a cat every week. All I got to do is give back the seed money plus interest. Bet.
Okay, so that's where punitive damages to disincentivize comes in. So if I were the arbitrator and this case came before me, you as the victim, so I'm looking, Mr. Roberts was robbed, back on January 1st. On January 15th, you file suit because you found out who stole it from you. Okay, you have all the evidence. It comes before me. We're not disputing summary judgment. Yes, this guy did it. Okay. Now my job as the administrator, I have two things to determine. Okay, I need to determine what was taken from you and what will disincentivize this individual from doing it to you or someone else in the future. You have presented evidence to me that he took my $1,500 on January 1st. He day traded with it from January 1st until January 15th when I filed suit against him. We're now at February 1st before you, Administrator Mr. Platt, and he has made a total to date of $700 on top of the $1,500 that he stole from me. And so I'm asking you, Administrator Platt, for two things: that you order him to return my original $1,500 to restore me to where I was before he stole it from me, and a punitive damage award of double what he earned by stealing that money from me, so as to disincentivize him from doing it to me again or anybody else. And then me as Administrator Platt, I say, you know what? That's what I'm going to do. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $2,900. So now the guy thinks, if I steal $1,500 from someone and I make $700 off the $1,500, and I'm at $2,200, but I get caught and I'm subsequently sued, I'm not only gonna lose the $2,200, but I'm gonna lose an additional $700 to boot. Maybe I might not want to steal from people, or at least modify how I do it so I'm not caught. But we're not talking about those kind of social
No,
tabs.
no.
We're talking about the relatively reasonable thinking ones.
So I have gone on record more than once saying that I'm against reparations. And the reason why I'm against reparations is the appropriate number. I'm not sure that much money exists.
Probably doesn't.
So, I mean, even if we took 1 year of GDP, and said, tell you what, 60%, but let's use your talk because that's free labor. So to make punitive, we double 60%. So
No, no,
100.
no, no, not
Nope.
double 60%. Double what it is that they earned off that 60%,
Okay.
whatever the case may be.
Well, if you stole labor, you paid nothing and you made 60% of GDP. That's what you
Okay.
made.
Okay.
So
So
if I'm,
okay, yeah, double it. Okay, we'll go with that to make it easier.
yeah, because I mean, so it's what, even if we just took 1 year, forget 400, the nation's not 400. But my point is,
Mm-hmm.
1 year of GDP takes 60%, you double that. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. Some have calculated it out as being north of $44 trillion.
So what I'm looking at here is you would let's not get so dramatic. Let's just talk about libertarians. Do you think you could get a room full of libertarians? Most rooms I've been in is a whole bunch of white boys. Do you ever think you could get a room full of libertarians to say that sucks, but that's what it's got to be? Because for the record, to your point, it comes out of the taxpayer, but you'd really be doing this punitive. You'd probably, wouldn't you really be going against the government? Wouldn't it be the people versus the government, basically? Or
And that's another thing. If we're going to keep this relic called government in place, the government, because it not only enshrined it into law but actively endorsed it, established fugitive slave brigades, passed fugitive slave laws, all these different things. The government, the abstract that is government, would have a share in the responsibility for making whole the individuals or the beneficiaries or the descendants of the individuals whose labor was stolen. Okay.
because I'm looking at it like
Um.
this: if two guys commit a robbery, okay,
Mhm.
two guys commit a robbery, one guy gets killed in process. The guy who survived, they don't give him half the weight. He gets charged if he did the thing by himself. You with me
And
on this?
I'm with you on that. That doesn't
So
necessarily mean that it's right,
okay, so
but
okay,
that's what it is.
okay. Because I'm looking at
Mhm.
like, okay, so the slave owners, and not just slave owners, because we got to say that here. I think it's less than 3% of the nation at any time owned slaves, or was even a member of a family that owned slaves. Having said that, 60% of the GDP, there was damn near nobody that wasn't getting a taste. If you look at our GDP today, first off, you'd have to add up certain things to get to 60%. You'd have to add up certain buckets to get there. But I promise you, no matter what group of buckets you pick, there's no American that can say, I don't benefit from this. It's just too
Yeah.
big of the pie. So
Mhm.
I honestly call that a cop out when people are like, my daddy didn't own slaves. He might not own slaves, but he might have built the slave ships up in Maine. You know what?
Right.
He might have built whips. I don't know what he did, but it's 60% of the GDP. Everybody was getting a taste.
Okay.
There's a
Well,
reason
now
why when the cops come in, they arrest the girlfriend too, even though she's a registered nurse. Because you know what? You know your man ain't got no job, but he's rolling on 27s. That Cadillac, that Navigator is super clean. You benefiting from this money, from the illicit funds. So
Mhm.
if you take the money, you might not have done the deed, but you took the money, and maybe you didn't ask no questions, but you probably should have. So I only say that to say this. I guess I'm really asking. I'm not saying anything. I'm asking who pays.
Okay.
Now, I'm guessing as a
Again,
libertarian, you're going to say the answer is always the people at the end of the day, but go ahead.
um, so because government is an abstraction, government is not actually an entity. It's an abstraction of so that we can conceptualize things that are done in relationship to the abstraction that is government. Government is staffed, filled with people. There's no getting around that. Okay, people are in government. People are what make government. How many people? Is it 2 people? Is it 5 people? Is it 20 people? Is it 1 person? You can argue those points from now to the cow comes home. The fact remains, government is staffed with people. So government is an abstraction. Because this abstraction was accepted by enough individuals within the society that who felt like if the government says something is right or allowed or legal, then we're going to go ahead and do it. The government apparatus has a duty, if it's going to remain intact, to pay part of whatever is necessary to make these people whole plus punitive damage. Government can't pay anything that it first doesn't extract from other people. So it has to aggress against somebody else in order to make whole someone that it aggressed against in the past. The only way I could see the government actually making things whole is by creating a 2-tier system where now this group of people get certain privileges and benefits that this group of people doesn't get. And from a libertarian standpoint, I don't think that is all the way right. But
Two
if we're
wrongs
going
don't
to
make a
keep,
right.
yes, but if we're going to keep this apparatus in place that is government, which is downright force, and force being antithetical to libertarianism, then we can at least attempt to force this entity to make people whole who were victimized or who are descendants of those who were victimized by the entity back then. So, for instance, while the government can't really provide something that it first didn't extract from somebody else by force, the government can say, well, those who have traced themselves back to slaves, they don't pay any income taxes, or they don't pay any taxes at all for a period of X number of years. And on top of that, the government will finance a bachelor's degree from certain institutions to a cost up to, let's say, average in-state tuition. I couldn't even tell you what it is now because it's been so long. But let's just say average in-state tuition to a reasonable institution is about $20,000 a year. So you get $80,000 towards a bachelor's degree, and you get 10 years, no taxes, no sales taxes, no excise taxes, no income taxes, no payroll taxes, blah, blah, no taxes for 10 years. And after that, our hands are clean. We've quote unquote repaid you. And if there are people who decide that they want to take that deal and run with it, whatever. Me, from a personal standpoint, whether we argue that that's being right or being wrong, that's neither here nor there. From a personal standpoint, I personally would feel like, okay, if the government is not going to charge these descendants of American slaves taxes for 10 years, and on top of that, provide them with a free bachelor's degree. If they can't make a go of it after that, then it is what it is. Now you're left to your own devices. Something similar to that, I think, may come close to making descendants whole for being descendants of slaves who had their labor stolen. So, let's say, for instance, Stephen, through 5 generations, descended from slave Chicken George, and Chicken George had 30 years of his labor stolen from him. Okay, which comes up to a dollar amount of X. So either Stephen can have no taxes equal to that dollar amount plus interest plus inflation plus punitive damages, or a combination of no taxes and free education to make up for what was stolen from his ancestor. That, in my opinion, would rise to the occasion of making descendants of American slaves whole. Now, Chicken George had 2 kids. Those 2 kids had 3 kids apiece. So now we're at 6 on the second generation from Chicken George. Those 6 kids each had, 2 here, 3 there, 5 there, 1 there. So now the 4th generation has X many descendants, and then you finally get to the generation where George is. I forget the name that I used that quick, but you
Our
get to
person
the
today, our today man.
Or today man from Chicken George. He is one of 150 descendants of Chicken George, or 150 descendants of Chicken George and his partner or wife or what have you. And so their labor together, okay, over them number of years, okay, accounting for inflation, accounting for interest, accounting for penalties, has to be split up among those 150 descendants. And then the government, say for instance, they don't charge them taxes for a number of years equal to what they may have reasonably paid based on what they paid in the past. Okay.
So I see what you're doing. Instead of taking from a group, you're saying
right.
Not taking from a group. So instead of taking from the whites, let's not take from blacks.
For a period of time, right.
I got a couple concerns. Well, really just things to point out. So one, let's start with Chicken George, generation 1. His labor and his work had a value over his lifetime.
Yes.
You can't just, let's say it was just one generation. You can't just give the money to his child, because also what was lost was, had the money been in his hands while the child was being raised, that child would have been put on a higher platform from which them to bounce off.
That's what we assume, but we don't know if Chicken George would have made a go of it.
We don't know it.
That he, yeah,
now,
we
statistically, we could put a distribution on it. My point is, we could put a distribution on it, but what we know for a fact is, in absolute, that foundation generationally was knocked down. We know that for a fact. We took that aptitude, because achievement is you've actually done it. So giving him the money for the work that he did, that's paying him for his achievement. There is still a recompense for the aptitude. What I could have done if I wasn't slaving in your fields. We can't just assume that 5-6 generations of black people on average would have been locked up on chain gangs or picking cotton had they been left unattended. What we actually should assume, the safer assumption, is what happened to the on average American generation to generation. So so it should be tracking that. I want to say that first. My other comment is, we are here today. On average, African Americans, given history, they are on average, they're not on average, they have the least amount of wealth on average. Okay, we've all seen the stats. We don't have to go through that here. So to give them a tax break for 10 years when they're at the bottom, that's a different savings. So let's say a guy makes 20 grand a year. He makes $30,000 a year. Okay. And you're like, you know what? Had we left your people alone, yes, some of you still would have made 30 grand, but some of you would be making 300 grand. I think the average white family right now has $900,000 in assets on average, the family. The black family, it's less than 100K. Had we left you alone, you'd have that same distribution. That's a lot of money that you don't have.
Well, wait a minute. I don't know if they would have had the same distribution, because remember that white family benefited. They're the end result of the years of benefiting from free labor. So if they weren't benefiting,
fair point. You're fair point. You're talking to transfer.
But what I'm saying is, if they weren't benefiting from all that labor, then would they be at 900,000, or would they be at 250,000?
Money is relative. So let's not focus on the exact number. A cat that has $1 million isn't bragging about having $1 million because of the number. It's because most people don't have $1 million.
Don't have $1 million, right?
So we can use the term 900K because of what it means in relation. So I hear what you're saying. We could take it down, but we don't really have to go through all that. I always give this example. If you walk into work and your boss get out of the blue gives you a 20% raise, you're feeling pretty good, right? You weren't expecting
until you find out everybody else got a 20% raise and all the prices went up by 20%.
Nope.
So you're right back where you started.
Worse. Till you go to the lunchroom, you found out everyone else got a 50% raise.
Oh, well, then that's a worse position, right?
You ready to fight. 5 minutes ago, you're like, man,
you were feeling pretty good.
That's more money than I had. Now you're angry. You want to fight. Money is relative. It's relative. Right. So if the average white family has 900,000 in assets, that's the number. That's the number. So my point is, it's not enough. Are you going in twice? It's not enough. You can switch over if you want. I just had to mute it when you come in. Just let me know.
Yeah. Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, it's not enough to simply say, okay, average white family has 900K, average black family has 60,000. We're going to give them a tax break on that 60,000 in assets for 10 years, and then they're good.
No.
You see where I'm going with that? Honestly, you see, if that much of a differentiation.
What I'm looking at is a two-tier. So you start with the free education. They don't pay for the education. They're whatever they're at beginning with when they begin their education, government sees to it that they have at least that or some basic level of comfort while they're learning. Okay, they're not paying any taxes. Once they receive their degree or after the 4 years, then they move into the 10 years of no taxes on anything, whether it's earnings or property or what have you. And then after that 10 years, now you move into, now you're just like everybody else. You're paying the same fair share. So that gives them an opportunity, with the free education to learn skills, things to improve their station once they're hitting the ground running by themselves. And then the 10 years gives them an opportunity to build up wealth without being subject to any wealth taxes or income taxes or different things like that. And then once that 10 years has expired, then, they're left to their own devices without any more assistance in the way of being tax-free or free education. And again, what I'm talking about isn't exactly the best solution, but that's just, a starting point. We want to look at if we're really truly trying to make whole those who were the descendants of those who were victimized. We want to look at solutions that are going to make them whole, relatively speaking, and at the same time minimize any damage being done to other people in the society, and at the same time, set them up so that when they do join society where they're paying taxes and all this other stuff, they're not being regressed back to the same spot that they were in when they started.
So I just ran a quick number here. The numbers me and you were talking.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I'm about to enter on my iPad. So if you
want go ahead. I got you. Okay. Bring you in. And
okay, cool. Hold on, let me turn this one off.
Okay. There you go.
All right.
I can't hear you though. So you just got turn on your volume, but it sounds like you can hear me. So I just ran some quick numbers here. I'm coming up with what's my number here? Let me move this. I got $27 trillion. However you do it, and incentives, college, whatever you want to call it, I got $27 trillion for the current population.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
So I got you. Let's go through. I've been ignoring people here. Let's do this in order. So actually a lot of these questions are to you, man. You're popular. Okay. So So you got this one here. You were talking about government. And so I think Andrew was asking a statement you made. Does any action that government does, that any action of government, is it automatic that government has to harm someone? If they're helping if they're helping group A, is it automatic they always have to be hurting someone else? I think that's his question. Okay, you're not. We lost you again on volume. We don't got you. No. Still showing you. It's still showing you muted yourself here. Actually, let me try. Hold up. Go now. No. So yeah, while we're going that, so I think that seems to be of his question. Basically, he's asking for more clarity on the approach that if government's doing something, it's hurting someone. I think is his question, asking if that's what you're saying. He's continuing on by saying, "Is it possible for government to do something that's neutral? Maybe neutral. A cost and a gain, or advantage to everyone." I think that's what he's asking here. No, sir. We had you for a minute. They were both feeding. So I'm going to ask a question of this gentleman here. 89 years. I'm just wondering, where did you get this number from? Where did you get this number? 89 years of tax exemption for direct descendants of slaves would be justifiable. Just curious, where'd you get that number? Was that the average life expectancy right now of a woman or a guy? I don't know. Americans can't be that healthy. 89 years. That don't sound right. Because black people are about 13.4% of the American population. Of that black population, it's estimated that about 76% can actually trace their lineage back to African American slaves. So, and that makes sense if you think about it. Not everyone who's black in America is a descendant of slaves. So, yeah. Ah, okay. So I see where you got the 89 years from. Okay, so I personally appreciate the effort, but it'd be hard for me. It'd be hard for me to bite my tongue. Actually, we got our man back. How about now? We got you. Still no volume. So I see what you did there. I guess at the risk of coming off to Frederick Douglass, to Marcus Garvey, to Malcolm X militant, while de jure slavery may have ended in 1865, I still would like to first remind us that Juneteenth, first off, Juneteenth, I think I heard something. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
I got you.
Okay, it went over the car, and what happened was I got a phone call from my phone, and it messed up my iPad.
Got it.
Gotta love technology, so I just turned the car off.
So if you could just volume up a little bit, then we got you. But so coming back to Farmer Statesman, I would like to first point out that Juneteenth. Well, actually, you still might be on. Juneteenth was 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. But my point is, de facto slavery continued well forward of that. So I put it this way, I'm not sure if we were actually at the table with the U.S. government. Would I say no deal over 89 years? I what is that? That's basically three and a half generations. Yeah. So I think that could be a game changer. But honestly, I would start at the table from I would start thinking in cohorts, generational cohorts from 1776 to I'd honestly go to the 1970s. So I think mathematically or cohort, this isn't my field. Let's do it real quick. How long? How many years is a generation on average? Okay, 20 to 30 years. Let's take 25 years. So we'll take 25 years. I got you. I heard sound.
Okay, I don't know if you want to repeat what you said. I lost
Yeah,
track on
absolutely. We're just
stuff.
so the car. I asked Farmer Statesman where to get this number from, and
Okay,
he had
80.
quote
I saw
89
the
years.
89 years.
Right. So I'm really talking about the fact that this would cover three and a half generations if you base it off this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm arguing that you got another three generations to rectify for through de facto slavery, and
Okay.
not only just slavery, active keeping African Americans out of the mainstream access to economics. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you can kill a man many ways. One of the ways was you're not allowed to go to the bank and mortgage a house. We
Right.
saw this with black war
Redlining.
workers, redlining, even the war workers during World War II,
Yes.
when everyone likes to wax all, oh, those were the
Sentimental.
days,
Right. And they weren't.
you know. So, um, so honestly, I honestly feel most of the time that being shut out of mainstream economics hurt African Americans actually more than slavery. Because think about it. Had we done Reconstruction right, as a nation, I argue there's a lot of stuff we're dealing with right now we would not be dealing with
Right.
had
Well,
we done Reconstruction properly.
okay. And then I think someone had asked the question, is there anything that the government can do that would not be a victimization of people in order to benefit other people?
Yes.
Okay, so again, looking at the nature of government. Okay, so can that be qualified that the government has to harm one group to support another? So we want to look at the nature of government. How does government get its resources? Through taxation. The forceful extraction of resources from many times unwilling participants. Um, and even if they're willing, a lot of times the amount they're not willing to give that amount. And so, if a person has the choice to say no thanks, then it's not government anymore. Because remember, government is force. If I can say, or I can choose whether or not I want to engage in an activity, and I can choose the parties to that activity, now we've gone into the realm of contracts. We're no longer in the realm of government. Something that old time medieval Europe called chancery court, wherein you've got two parties to an implicit contract or explicit contract. They can't come to an agreement as to what's going on and who owes what to whom and how much and for what reason. So they go before a chancery judge or a adjudicator, and the guy says, well, Steven, stole my chicken, and he cheated on my sister when he dated her to boot. And Steven says, well, that chicken's mine because the chicken wandered onto my property. And now we go before the chancery administrator. It's like, okay, does the chicken belong to Steven because he wandered onto his property, or does the chicken belong to George because the chicken was George's first and he had a responsibility to keep the chicken in his property or on his property, right?
So I'm watching Andrew respond. So let me, I
Mm-hmm.
see where he's going with this. Can me and you say that we want our government to hold us accountable? Or is that still putting contractual? Can me and you say, hey, if one of us steals from the other, we want there to be consequences. And
So
then one of us steals, can we prevent that person from saying, "Oh, now that you caught me stealing, I changed my mind. I opt out."
So Raymond says to Mac, "Hey, you and I are going to get together and form some sort of society wherein I can't take stuff that belongs to you, and you can't take stuff that belongs to me. And if either one of us does that, then these are the penalties, blah, 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 blah." And Mac, a year later, steals something from Raymond. It has been determined that he indeed stole it from Raymond. It indeed belonged to Raymond. Now Mac says, "I don't want to participate.
I opt out
I
of.
opt out." You uh, you signed a contract, and when Mac stole from Raymond, Mac violated the contract. He's in breach of contract. And so now he's in default. And according to the terms of the contract, this is what happens when Mac is in default. Now, Mac can say all day long that he opts out. No, you don't, because you opted in. You opted in first. Okay. But that's a contract between Mac and Raymond. Now, Mac builds a house, Raymond builds a house. Mac fishes, Raymond farms. Okay, Mac trades his fish for raised crops. Okay, Raymond or not Raymond. 2 years down the line, these two fine women drop out of the sky. My woman's no finer than yours, who's no finer than mine. So we're not fighting over who has the finer woman. Okay. You have a number of kids, I have a number of kids. These children have decided that they wanted to remain in this society. So your children have made a contract with my children. You and I have made a contract with each other's children that nobody would steal from anybody else. If someone does, they're in breach of contract. These are the penalties. Now, your son steals from my daughter. Okay. My daughter wants her stuff back. If your son then tries to say, "Well, I opt out," no, you don't, because you agreed. You signed a contract. You actually affixed your name to the terms. Okay. And you're participating in this. You signed your name upon this document that laid out the terms of participating in this society. Okay.
Well, hold on, because we know libertarians split on this. There
Mm-hmm.
are guys who are like, I was never asked about the laws of this nation.
Exactly.
Different levels of extremism. I know you've ran into a sovereign or two.
Yes, or 3 or 5. I have them in my family.
So my point is, these are people saying, I did not opt into any of those laws. I never agreed to any of that. What does libertarianism say to them? Because they're not lying.
That's what libertarian says to them. They're not lying.
So does that mean they get to just go around doing what they want to do?
No,
Or is it?
No, they don't get to go around doing what they want to do. They get to do what they want to do so long as they're not violating anyone's rights. But to say that this government gets to force them to participate in something that they didn't agree with, no, that's not right.
Okay, so we're saying that laws against harming others, that makes sense, whether you opted in or not officially.
Well, let's bear that out. Laws against harming others. Okay, let's bear that out, because now
Okay.
we're dancing into the territory of natural law and discovering the law, and that's what our judges used to do when they adjudicated cases between two people in chancery court. They discovered the natural law,
Okay.
discovered what laws work best for this society based on things that were brought before them. It's reactionary, but it was the best policy to prevent rights from being violated. Okay, so discovering the law. If I say to you, Raymond, by the power vested in me by the god named Thor, I hereby declare that 2 + 2 = 4. What would you think?
That whether you participated or not, it's still the truth.
Okay, how about I say, by the power vested in me by the god Thor, I hereby declare that 2 + 2 = 5. And furthermore, if anyone says that 2 + 2 = 4, they shall suffer penalty XYZ. What would you think?
Coercion. Okay.
Well, not what else? Is that the only thing you think?
Well, it's inefficient as well because it's not true. I don't benefit from using that. No one benefits from that. Well, I take that back. You might benefit,
Right.
but the greater whole doesn't benefit. That's what I'd be thinking. It's spoilage. It's spoilage.
Okay. If I, tried to declare that 2 + 2 = 5, wouldn't you think that I was a little loony?
Yeah, but I wouldn't say it. You just threaten to shoot me if I say something. So I'm just going with the story here.
Okay. Now let's take the other part out. If I just say, by the power vested in me by the god Thor, I hereby declare that 2 + 2 = 5, and I leave it at that.
All right, be like, all right, stay on your side of town. You're crazy, but you're allowed to be crazy.
But you would believe that something is wrong with me. By
Right.
me declaring that 2 + 2 = 5 doesn't make it so.
Okay, I'll give you that. But how about this? Survival of the fittest. I've been out there watching the animals run around. Survival of the fittest, homie. So if I can kill you and your family and take that, that's just as natural as a lion out in the woods. What do you say to them?
So we're not like lions out in the woods. We have the capacity to reason. If you go from a Christian standpoint, I know a lot of people denigrate Christianity, but the fact remains there were some Christian principles that some things were based on. If you go from a Christian standpoint, plants have a body. They have a body. Animals have a body and a consciousness of life.
Okay.
Human beings have a body, a consciousness of life, and a consciousness of God. That consciousness of God is what we call that reasoning ability out in the natural world. Okay, in the Christian world, it's the consciousness of God, his universal law, and how it applies to us as human beings so that we can live. If I were to say that by the power vested in me by whatever source, that gravity hereby is no longer a law, that gravity has been repealed, then you, Raymond, oh, well, shit, gravity's been repealed. Let me go to the Matterhorn and, jump. What's going to happen?
Okay.
Gravity has not been repealed. Gravity is a natural law.
But in that case, the person trying to apply it did self-harm. In my case, manifest destiny, they harmed others, but to their own benefit and to their ancestors, their descendants' benefit.
Yeah, and
See,
they were wrong for that. And what I'm driving at is law is law no matter what somebody else says to the contrary. So for someone to say that for 24 hours we're going to have something called the purge, and you can go around murdering people and the government won't charge you with first degree homicide or what have you. Okay, maybe the government apparatus won't charge you with murder, but try and go around and murder people at will and see what happens. Now, Mac has an AK-47, an AR-15, a couple of pump action shotguns, and some Glocks and Smith and Wessons. Okay, so if Raymond now, because the government has told him that for 24 hours he can kill whoever he wants to, and they won't charge him, maybe the government won't charge him. But if Raymond steps on my property and threatens my life, he's going to get a taste of AK-47, AR-15, Glocks, pump action shotguns, and anything else, because he tried to violate a natural law, and his violation of the natural law is the loss of his own life.
well, let's take this back to the community here. You saw what happened in Kenosha.
Yes.
Yes. This is where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
I've been talking about how, let's take the natural law of self-defense. What I saw that night was an African-American community who did not feel that they had the right to defend themselves.
Against who?
Against militia, police, because it was so confusing that night.
Okay.
It was so confusing.
It was everybody, not just
you didn't know who was who.
Right. And I think it was
What I keep challenging people, find a single frame, single photo, single video frame of a single African American that night doing open carry. At night. Mm-hmm. Just think about it. Nighttime. Mm-hmm. Army on the ground, plainclothes police, uniform police, and that pseudo halfway in between SWAT and everything. Mm-hmm. I did not see, and I challenge you will not find a single African American crazy enough to believe that the Second Amendment was their right in
Or
this
that the
America.
statutes apply to them as far as open carry is concerned here in the state of Wisconsin.
In the middle of the night when a whole bunch of scared white boys is running around.
I agree.
So I guess what I'm trying to tie, this is often an accusation that people have of libertarianism. There's the esoteric or the idea. And then how do we actually apply this? How do we apply it? So coming back to, we get some libertarians in, because what I'm hearing right now is some libertarians come in, they maybe hear some grievances and hear out some public grievances about settling some old debts, maybe. And then once that's done, then tear down the structure to its original, what it was originally designed to be. So, okay, well, here's some grievances. Okay, African-American community, we heard your grievance. I'm sure there's other grievances. We'll hear them out case by case about things that happen because of the government. They happen because of the government. Hear those out, try to do judgments, and then let's strip the government down to what it was meant to be. That's kind of what I'm hearing. Are you okay with this paraphrasing so far?
Yes.
I don't hear any libertarians talking about that first step, man. So far, all I hear is the tearing down. And I think that's where they lose people.
Is that they don't go to the first step.
People don't hear the conversation about the first step. I'm not saying this is about to get libertarians into office, but that might be a bridging gap of y'all keep going to step two.
You got to go back to step one.
Yeah, people got to hear step one, then step two. What are you guys about? We're about engaging, addressing grievances of improper government, and then restructuring government to mitigate or prevent that from happening again.
Right, to its proper form. And when I say to its proper form, you have to excuse me. I really don't see government being proper in almost any context. But the fact remains is we're human beings here on the planet, this side of Eden. Things aren't going to work the way that anarcho-capitalists believe that they could work because of human nature. It's just, it is what it is. I could live in an anarcho-capitalist society. I'm sure you could. I'm sure a number of individuals could, but there are sociopaths among us, and they don't desire to live in an anarcho-capitalist society. So the unfortunate thing is there is this little bit of fire, a little bit of force that kind of comes in because of these individuals, because of our sin nature, our fallen nature, our human nature, however you want to name it.
So for me personally, I argue that a good chunk of my success in life is my openness with myself about how unreliable I am. I make that joke. When people be like, hey, Ray, don't you trust me? I'm like, what are you talking about? I've known me my whole life. I don't even trust me.
I don't know you as nearly as long as I've known myself. Why would I trust you more than I trust myself?
And I'll go in further. I don't even trust me is my point. I believe in systems. I don't trust people. I don't trust myself. I trust systems. I trust things that I can, people are unreliable, including me. In general, we're variable. If you give me a tank of helium and I heat it up, some very consistent things are going to happen as I heat up that gas and as I bring down the temperature. People are not like that. I can say the same sentence to 15 different people and get 19 different reactions. We're variable. So for that reason, I like things other than people, because I do like a level of consistency around me. So I like freedom, but no, I don't want to walk down the street every day and every time I see a police officer, it's a coin toss whether we go from a 0 to 100. I don't want that level of variation. Okay. Honestly, I don't want that level of variation with my neighbors. So the question then becomes to me, how bad do I not want that? Am I willing to hire a private army? Am I willing to live like a prepper the rest of my life? You know, yes, we could do our own roads. I agree with you. We could do our own roads. My ass ain't being out there and playing with no asphalt. And I ain't going out there. Not going to stop anyone else from going out there, but you ain't going to catch me out there. I'll pay the tolls and complain about them like everybody else. So I argue that, and yes, we are individuals, but I am not convinced we are individual animals. Like this myth of the lone wolf, I don't think that's us innately. I think we are actually communal creatures, collective creatures. Put it this way, Facebook is not a sea of individuals. People don't post to Facebook just to say they posted to themselves. It's that feedback, it's that engagement. That is the natural human being that I observe. So where I struggle with personally is libertarianism acknowledging that side of humanity, that part of humanity that innately, naturally seeks socialization. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. I mean, what say you to that? Libertarianism and socialization, good and bad, because you can't have it all perfect. You hear these people that have never been married. Well, if you and your wife fight, that's not a good marriage. That's why your ass is single. That's not how it works. Society is, if society is people and people are variable, like I said, they're not like the helium gas. They're all over the place. You kind of have to build a society that doesn't pretend that people acting variable is abnormal, but in fact says that that is predictably irrational. We predict that people are going to be irrational. So if you predict people are going to be irrational, what, if anything, does society do? Do you just build a network of contracts? Like, hey, before you come into town, here are the contracts in case you act predictably irrational. Because right now, I think using your language, we put a lot of this on the government. Whether the government has taken these rights or has taken these actions, or we have ceded them over, like just given this sovereignty. I'm hearing from you, there's a lot of things that the government does for us that they should not be doing, and we maybe should never have gave it to them to do. Are you okay with that statement? So what do we do instead? Because if there's certain things that the public gave to the government, there was a reason why they did that. So maybe they were wrong to give that job to the government. It's kind of like, you find out a 15-year-old just got their learner's permit. You probably were wrong to give them the keys to your Ferrari. So, but there was a reason why you did it. So that human need of, I'm wanting to put the responsibility on someone else. I'm lazy. I don't have the time. I don't have the expertise. I don't have the interest in learning the expertise. I don't want to learn how to defend my home from the Russians. I will pay someone else. I will give someone else the authority to defend my home from the Russians. What say you about what should it be instead? What should it be instead of giving some of these things? You can take the local level if you want. The venture capitalism, you brought that one up. We gave that to the government, or we didn't say anything when they took it. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
But the people did it for a reason. So how should that have looked instead of going to the government? Should it just been natural selection or natural organization? What are you thinking?
I'm thinking a lot of things. I think you asked me about 20 different questions.
Okay, so let's I'm sorry for that. Let's keep it very simple.
All right.
You have said there's things that the government does that they shouldn't be doing.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing it because part of the population, if not all at times, or most all, are okay with them doing it. So if the government doesn't do it, but the people want it done, what's the mitigation?
Okay.
Are you just going to say, do it yourself? What's the mitigation?
So let's take communication, for instance. The government doesn't force us to communicate in one way or another. but it does regulate communication. So we're going to leave that aside. But, back in the mid 1800s, we wrote letters, or we walked or took horse and buggy to go see someone and talk to them face to face. Fast forward to the early 1900s, and we had telephones and bell system, and fast forward to the 1950s and 60s. You had rich people who had car phones, and then you fast forward to the early 90s, and now you have mobile phones that aren't fixed in place. And fast forward up until today, you and I are in two different localities, and we're speaking to each other in real time. First, it was on my cell phone, and I put in some code, and it went from my cell phone to my iPad, right? And so we've had this progression of communication devices and communication abilities, or what have you. The government didn't force any of that. People wanted more efficient communication. And other people who knew about the technology and knew about how to research that technology to make it better, they filled a demand. The government didn't say, by the power vested in us by, the people of the various 50 states, we hereby rule and decree that cell phones now shall be a thing. That's not how they came about. They came about because people like you and I wanted something, and other people like you and I knew how to provide it. And
Well,
they
hold
provided.
on, because you jumped from mail to this, so I'm with you to a point. But here's the thing, man. Um, let's talk about the Pony Express, U.S. Mail. Where it's lucrative and viable, yes, people like me and you figure out a way to provide it to people if they're willing to pay.
Well, point of order, I didn't specifically say mail. I said we wrote each other letters.
Fair
So
enough, communication,
yeah, so
communication.
sometimes, yeah. So
But we
it
can
could have,
jump today to Wi-Fi.
yeah.
There's places in this country you can't get no Wi-Fi. Rural areas, they're dead zones because it's just not lucrative at this time for companies to provide coverage out in these areas.
And so the
So,
people who are in those areas have a choice to make. A, live without it, or B, go somewhere where it is.
okay.
It's very simple to say that I want to live in the hills of Idaho, and I should have Wi-Fi coverage like they have in the Loop in Chicago. And furthermore, the Idaho government should make everyone in Idaho send money to whatever fund. And furthermore, the Idaho government should put pressure to bear on the federal government to subsidize Wi-Fi in the backwoods and hills of Idaho. That is an aggression. That is completely and totally contrary to what government should be doing in any way, shape, or form or fashion. Okay. Um, Wi-Fi is lucrative in downtown Chicago because in one building you've got maybe 5 or 10,000 people. Okay. So, you're going to get returns on your investment many times over. Whereas that same 10,000 people may be spread out over 100 square miles in the hills of Idaho. You've got to now build all sorts of infrastructure and towers and so on and so forth to serve that same 10,000 people. It's not worth it monetarily. Now, if
Okay.
those people who live in Idaho want Wi-Fi, they are not morally justified in getting Wi-Fi by victimizing others to get it.
So coming back to the hood.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, because people have said that if you don't like the hood, just move.
That's totally different.
And I'm going to give you that. I know part of your answer because you're saying first we need to rectify some past.
Yes.
But right now, I'm just saying people say that. I'm not saying it's right, but we hear that. People say, hey, you know what? If poor people are tired of being poor, just stop being poor. Get out of the hood. Yeah, you hear that all day.
Yes.
Yeah, you're black, but slavery happened so long ago. Just pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Okay, give me my bootstraps and then I'll do it. That's the problem. Well, when you talk about if you're tired of being poor, just stop being poor and do XYZ and you'll not be poor anymore. That it's a non sequitur when it comes to the Wi-Fi out in Idaho. people who are in the hills in Idaho, you know, for the most part, that's a conscious decision that they made to go move out there. When it comes to living in the hood, I don't think I know of anyone who made a conscious decision to go move into the hood and then live as a pauper.
Well,
There are
most of the
some
white
people,
kids, most of the
you know,
white
no,
kids,
there's some people who have moved to the hood, but they haven't moved to the hood and then have made a conscious decision to live as paupers. You know,
right.
they moved to the hood, but they hold their own.
Well,
You know,
James Baldwin said that the only thing you can ever do to improve the ghetto is to destroy it.
fine, but don't do it while the people are in it.
No, I don't think that's what James
Oh, I hope
Baldwin
you didn't
meant.
mean that.
No, James Baldwin's point was the people who live in the ghetto didn't build the ghetto.
Right.
You built this, and let's talk about the definition of a ghetto. A ghetto is to section off groups of people and to
Based
make
on
it
certain criteria
difficult, and then make it difficult, if not impossible, to
to,
exit that area.
yes.
So, given that definition, destroy that. Destroy the thing that sections off certain people and keeps them in there. I would argue that's what a civil rights leader was meaning when he said such a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to bring us home here about our local communities.
Mm-hmm.
The barriers are harder to see, but I argue those barriers to leave certain areas still exist. Is that a valid statement in a libertarian's mind?
The barriers are harder to see, but they're still there, preventing people from overcoming them.
So take Milwaukee. You hear a lot of talk about Milwaukee. The numbers, the outcome numbers right now. I forget the zip code 53206 or something like that.
Yes, that's the one. It is
Getting
the worst. Yeah.
Statistically, a black male, statistically, his future is decided the moment he is born, if he's born in Milwaukee.
Yes.
And let me stop be so individual. If you give me 10 black male babies
9
that
of
were born
them.
today, I not 9. I can place bets on where 7 of them are going to end up.
Okay.
7 out of 10. We can do this 10 times. I'm going to make my money.
Mm-hmm.
That is how strong these barriers, these systems, these constructs are in Milwaukee, that you just give me 10 lots and I just randomly call out what 7 are going to be. Actually, all 10 of them, I'm going to say something's going to happen to them. It's going to happen to 7 out of 10 of them often enough. I'm going to make money more than I lose.
Right. And so I'm glad that you brought up Milwaukee. I've done fairly decent in Milwaukee as an employee of companies in Milwaukee. My background is quality assurance, and most people don't know this unless they're in the quality assurance field, but the American Society for Quality is headquartered in downtown Milwaukee. And so my vocation is very strong in Milwaukee. And once I discovered that early on in my career, I tried to exploit it to the best of my ability. And so even though I wasn't born in Milwaukee, I was born in Joliet, Illinois. We relocated to Racine, then we relocated to Kenosha. There are things that exist in the city of Milwaukee that, despite all of the disadvantages, because there are several of them there, despite all of the disadvantages, someone determined enough to get out can get out. This is not to victim blame. That's not what I want to do. Because, like you said, there are some systems that are set up to keep people from escaping. And if you do not renew your mindset such that you want to escape, you won't escape.
Well, let's dig on that. Let's just talk about the subpopulation of those who want to escape.
Well, hold on. I'm not quite finished. There are some people that don't realize the mire that they're in. Some people don't know that the situation that they're in is as bad as it is. Some people, you know, like, and I hate to say this because it sounds so terrible, but it illustrates it what better than anything else. They're happy as a pig and shit with the situation that they're in. You know, they sell a little weed, they sell a little crack, you know, or, you know, they sell a little ass, and, you know, they get their food stamps, they got their housing voucher, uh, you know, uh, they get around, they have their outings, or they have their events at home, or whatever the heck it is that, you know, the case may be. And I'm not trying to, you know, just pigeonhole all of them doing the same thing or what have you, but whatever it is that they're in, they're not really dissatisfied with it. Um, and the
But
reason and the
let
reason
me
I
just
say,
ask.
oh, go ahead. Some aren't.
So you got people that if they make $1 million a year, they're not happy. They keep pushing.
Keep pushing for,
You got people that will live off that government check and they're happy.
yeah.
I haven't seen any evidence that a white baby or a black baby coming out the womb, the predisposition to be one or the other is any different. So I'm saying that to say that you give me 10 white babies, yes, there's going to be some that just want to live off that check
Mm-hmm.
and drink whatever white kids drink. I don't know, Red Dog or something.
Don't give me the lion. I don't know.
So at the same time, the black. So I guess what I'm pointing out is there's an extremely different outcome there. And we have to ask the question, do we think it's because of what African Americans are, which I don't, or the construct having these outcomes? Because I agree with you. You have the variation, but are we saying that blacks, just because of who they are, is why 60% of the male population has a record? Is it really because that's just who they are? Or is it because they're the same exact people? You know, you go under the skin, you can't tell any difference genetically, intelligence wise, exact same, but the system is treating them differently. They're living the same way, but the world is reacting to that behavior in a different way.
Well, okay. So actually, I want to back up when you were speaking about humans, and you desire to have a system in place versus, you know, unreliable or random human beings. You know, humans are reliably unreliable. They are consistently inconsistent, and, you know, they are, as you said, rationally and predictably irrational and unpredictable.
I don't
And
want no one calling me out as stealing. That was Dan Ariely, famous
uh-huh,
behavioral economist. So no
yeah.
one be coming at me.
We're not saying that these are
Oh,
things
I
that
didn't
we
say
thought up
you.
on a
I
on
no,
a
when I be doing these things, man, if I don't cite, man, people be coming at me hard. So I got to
Well, you know
cite.
what? I have I don't even feed into that. You know, people can look that up, and they know that where it comes from, because it's something that's very common. But either way it goes, that's the paradox of the human being. So in comes government. That's why I go back to, well, what is government? It is an abstraction. It is a collection of who? Human beings. So if humans are the reason why you want some system in place to make humans more predictable, so on and so forth, but then to go to a system that is filled with the very humans that you want a system to control, from my standpoint, it looks uh insane to say I don't trust humans to do right. So what I want to do is take some of these humans that are untrustworthy and trust that they'll create a system that will make me feel safe and secure.
No, I hear what you're
Either
saying. No, that
so
makes complete
so
sense.
so either there are two or more classes of humans, such that there are some humans who can be trusted or trustworthy, or there's only one class of humans, and to entrust them with something like that is insanity.
Hold
Government.
on.
What?
I've heard you say that. Here's the thing. I'm not we had a saying in the army. I don't have to I don't have to believe in Allah to respect his power when I'm on the ground in a Muslim country. Basically, if I'm walking down the streets of Afghanistan, Allah's real and I can prove it to you. Throw a Quran on the ground and see what happens to you.
And who and what happens to you? Is it because of Allah or because of the followers of Allah?
So,
Does Allah send a thunderbolt down?
no, he sends an
Does
AK-47 round.
does Allah send an AK-47 round, or does his follower send an AK-47 round?
Let's keep it simple and say his follower.
Yeah.
So,
And I'm going.
hold on,
Oh,
because at the end of the day, you getting shot, it don't matter. Because if the person didn't read Allah, if they didn't believe in him, you wouldn't have got shot. That's
and
my
I'm
point.
glad that you said that. Government, the issue that we have with government is what's between the ears and behind the eyes.
I'm
That's
still
what
trying to connect this to something for Milwaukee.
well,
Here's the difference. Here's why it's not insanity. White cops are majority the cops in white areas. We don't see the same interactions that we see when white cops are the majority in black areas. So it's not about having different types of humans or one type and you're being crazy. What I'm arguing, and I think others are too, is when the people who have the guns perceive correctly that those people are also like them, you get a different outcome than when they, through whatever perception or delusion you want to name it, when they look at those people and they see something other than themselves.
and
So
you just bared out what I said. The problem with government is what is between the ears and behind the eyes. Their perception.
are you thinking that it's the government why country white boys act the way they act in uniform in the city?
No. Again, government is an abstraction.
Okay, I see what you're saying. It's not actually the government. It's we the people are the government. Is what you're saying.
Well, let me finish now. Let me finish. The problem with government is what is between the ears and behind the eyes. Government is something that exists in the minds of the people who have legitimized it. If you and me and the residents of Kenosha and the residents of Racine and the residents of Milwaukee and all the residents of the state of Wisconsin, if all 5,800,000 of us decided tomorrow that going forward, we will not pay any more taxes. We as business owners will not collect any more income taxes, sales taxes, excise taxes, whatever taxes you want to name. What will government do? Because all 5,800,000 of us have decided that we're not going to do it. We're not going to pay the taxes. So if you have nobody, no human being in that government apparatus who's going to enforce it, you have nobody in the state of Wisconsin who is going to pay it, the tax doesn't get paid.
I hear you.
Well, let me finish. The reason why we have what we have going on is because people have legitimized the victimization in their own mind. They have considered or perceived that which is raw victimization as correct. So instead of calling it theft, no, we're going to call it taxation. Instead of calling it theft, we're going to say, oh, that's eminent domain. Instead of calling it violence and a threat of violence, we're going to call it, oh, it's a citation. Oh, it's a court hearing. People will say to me all the time, the government doesn't threaten to kill somebody over an ordinance. And I say, yes, they do. Let's bear this out. There's an ordinance against jaywalking. I jaywalk. The cop comes to me, writes me a citation. I don't take the citation. The cop could say, you know what? I know who it is. I'll just file the citation. Goes to court. The court sends me a nice little letter. Oh, you were cited for jaywalking. If you want to stipulate to the charge, you pay here, and a verdict of guilty will be entered against you. If you want to dispute the charge, show up to court on this day. I don't pay. I don't show up. Now a default judgment is entered against me. I owe $60 to the municipal government as a result. I don't pay it. Municipal government has a right to throw me in jail to the tune of 1 day for every $50 that I owe. So I could sit a day in jail. I have a warrant for my arrest because it's a bench warrant because I did not pay that citation for jaywalking and I was defaulted.
Okay.
Now, Racine Police comes upon me, they just do a random pullover. I know it's against the law to do that, but they do it. I'm just driving down the street. The speed limit's 30. I'm going 30. They pulled me over because they want to pull me over. They determined that, oh, you have a warrant for your arrest. I didn't think that the citation was justified in the first place, and I resist arrest. Right? They use whatever force that is necessary to get me into their vehicle or to stop resisting. And they take the stop resisting road and they put 2 bullets into my chest and I die because I jaywalked. Every law issued by the government is backed up by the threat of violence, particularly the threat of death. Some are several levels removed from that threat. Some are very close to that threat. Like if an officer witnesses you committing murder, you're probably going to get shot if you try and resist almost immediately. But my example of jaywalking leading to me having 2 bullets in my chest, it's backed up by force. That is what government is, and they get away with that because others have legitimized it. Oh, well, it's legitimate for the police to do that. It's legitimate for the government to do that. Okay? The problem that we have, even when it comes down to race relations, and I hate to use that
Oh, don't
word.
go to something different because I want to stick with this. I like it.
Okay, let me finish this one, and then I'll turn it back over to you. Even with race relations, and I don't like the term race because my belief is we're all the same human race. We have a few superficial variances here and there, but all humans pretty much have the same nature, and as unpredictable as humans are, you can pretty much predict what they will do in certain situations. And so when you have white officers, instead of them thinking that black people are something different than they are, when white officers believe or perceive that black people are no different than they are, then black people will get the same treatment as white people when officers engage. It's the problem is what exists between the ears and behind the eyes. And until how people perceive other people changes so that all people are perceived as people no matter what, we're going to continue to have these problems. Furthermore, what we call government is going to exploit those problems for its own selfish gain through divide and conquer.
So, working backwards,
Mm-hmm.
far as we all know that everyone's the same, race is an artificial construct.
Yes.
But I always twinge a little because that artificial construct wasn't built by the entire community of humans.
No, it wasn't.
So that first, working backwards. Next, I am having trouble trying to figure out what part of life is not backed by the gun. So I hear what you're saying about the government, but even if you walk around with a copy of the U.S. Constitution saying, these are my natural rights, I got news for you, brother. That piece of paper ain't bulletproof. So you could wrap your whole body in the U.S. Constitution. You still gonna catch slugs if somebody wants something you got.
Mm-hmm.
So The true enforcement of that idea of natural rights isn't the strength of the words, is that AK-47 and that pump shotty that you mentioned earlier. I didn't know if that was a Benelli Spaz 12 or what. I'm a Mossberg man myself, but I digress. Little tactical turkey. So I argue that I'll shrink it down. I'll just speak for America. I don't see no part of America that, you know, if someone asks, what's your credit? What's your bonding? You know, what's your security? I'm going to use your analogy. I don't know how many steps you got to go back, but if you go back enough steps, the answer is a piece of metal, some iron. It's a gun. Everything about this country is backed by the gun. Even when people be talking about we all owe all this money to China, Ray, you're an economist, Ray. We owe this money to China. What are we going to do about all this debt? I don't understand what people are talking about. Who's coming to collect from us?
At this point, nobody.
I tell people about how I think it was a little bit before, a little bit after the crash, sometime around there.
Which
Germany,
one?
Recession. So it was 08, 09.
Oh, okay.
So Germany, respectfully, because so a lot of people don't know this, but nations will hold gold reserves of each other's. I'm not going to bother trying to explain the why. I'm just saying fact.
That's what they do. We
have U.S. gold in Germany, and there's German gold sitting at Fort Knox. I'm glad you laugh. So for those of you not understanding why he laughed, keep listening to the story. Germany requested proof that the gold is there because they heard these crazy rumors that America don't got it. America wrote back a letter saying, we looked, it's there. Germany said, we appreciate this letter, but we'd actually like to send some of our people to America to physically look at it and confirm. America again said, don't worry about it. We looked, it's there. So I'm bringing this up to say that Germany stopped writing letters asking to look at that gold. When everyone's talking about, oh, the debt, the interest, China's going to own us, there is nothing. Well, nothing organized. Okay. There's nothing organized in America's way from just simply saying tomorrow, you know what?
You crap.
We thought about it, and that debt thing, we good, homie.
Yep.
We good. Which in a twisted way is why the US dollar is so strong. When you're on a US, well, actually half of them are all US. When you're on a battlefield, most currencies become worthless. The US dollar on a battlefield still has value. It's the craziest thing. You've probably seen stories back in World War II or where they're burning Weimarks. I think they were called Weimarks.
German marks. Yeah.
Between World War I, World War II, they're burning the money for heat during the winter. Or Zimbabwe. Or there's a couple other countries.
The $1 trillion bills.
Yeah, trillionaire. I'm still looking for one. I haven't found one. But
worth about 3 cents.
Sadly, I'd probably pay $5 just to get one, bro. But the idea is because at the end of the day, we back everything. We don't back things with gold in America. We back it with a gun. And because we back it with a gun, that makes our money so valuable to the point I haven't looked at the last T-bill sales, but our money sells at a negative interest rate.
Yep.
Now, my people, you're getting into it today. So what is a negative interest rate? A negative interest rate when you're doing a T-bill sell basically is a cat from China saying, America, I will give you $100 if you promise to give me back 97 in X amount of time. Now, you might say that's crazy, but what you should be asking yourself is why would someone with a
Why?
crap ton of money
Want to
give you
lose
100
and
in
only
terms
get back 3.
for 97? So
Mhm.
they're at a loss. Basically, they
Mhm.
see that they could lose more if they don't give that money to you.
Yep.
So to tie this all back home, when we talk about these natural rights, unalienable rights, false rights through government, or actually shouldn't use the word when we're talking about the government. What there's another term I should be using, but um, inappropriate leveraging of other people's sovereignty. How about that?
Yes.
Um, it's all backed by the gun, if you ask me. So we can pretend that we're all civilized and it's all pretty, and I think maybe people are willing to pay to stay under that illusion. But for me personally, again, you will never catch me burning down a building. You'll never catch me throwing a Molotov cocktail. You'll never catch me condoning such behavior. At the same time, you won't catch me condemning it. Now, someone's clutching their pearls right now. Why won't you condemn them, Ray? Because if I have to condemn black people for violence, I have to condemn America for violence. And sure, you can hem and haw and pontificate and say it's different.
No, it's not.
Kind of how I was saying to him earlier, whether it's the AK or Allah, your body don't care when those bullets are ripping through. You're not going to be sitting there wondering why you're on fire when you're on fire. Violence is violence. And I argue that America, everything that we have is built on threat of violence. Therefore, I don't think there's a way to opt out of violence. So you could tear down government, but you have not tore down the fact this country is built on violence. So maybe that means you don't have to take on the responsibility of violence yourself. So when I was an infantry officer, when people ask me what did I do, I would say I was a manager of violence. At the end of the day, as a combat infantry officer, I managed violence. If we take down government, that may be, you need to say it out loud. That's what we're saying. Tear down government, and you or your friends or your neighborhood, you personally take responsibility for the management of violence. Anything you try to build alleging that it's absent violence, once it gets word out to the people who control violence themselves, once the word gets out that you think you built something that works without violence, violent people are going to show up. I guess that's my not so happy turn in this conversation.
Very
Where
very Hobbesian. Libertarianism, voluntarism, classical liberalism, all of these presuppose a basically good human nature. Hobbesianism presupposes a basically bad human nature. The religion that I subscribe to, you can kind of say it's more or less like a hybrid of that, in that unimpeded human nature is basically bad, but the capacity for good is there if they subscribe to a philosophy or higher power that shows them that things will be better doing it the good way versus the bad way. So if you want to call it Christianity, if you want to call it libertarianism, if you want to call it the way, whatever you want to call it, you know, uh, a polite and civilized society um, does not make polite and civilized individuals. Polite and civilized individuals are what make a polite and civilized society. And
I'll give
so
you that.
there again, you have to go back to what's between the ears and behind the eyes. It's all about what's in the minds of the people. If in the collective minds of the people, if they believe that people are basically bad, that there's really no saving them, but I'm good, but the rest of them out there, they're all bad, but I'm okay, then you're going to have people who want to set up a system such that it places chains and bonds and controls over these people who look like this and have that certain skin color, but it doesn't quite apply to the rest of us who don't have that skin color and we don't have those attributes.
So let me link my concern to what you were saying.
Okay.
I believe that on long term, humans are Hobbesian.
Mm-hmm.
They're bad.
Okay.
Short term, they're good. Things they can see in front of them, I think they're actually more often good than not.
Okay.
So I think if we were better at thinking long term versus immediate gratification, if that was the average human internally, naturally, I think a lot of the bad things that happen would be less likely to happen. They're not going to go away. Less prevalence, less likely.
Mm-hmm.
You look at slavery again. Slavery didn't just hurt blacks. The South is still looking how it looks today because of slavery. They're still behind. That they crippled themselves economically because you had all this free labor. Guess what you weren't doing? You weren't innovating. You weren't improving. You weren't keeping your game up. So then as they lost that, that's why they struggled with Jim Crow to try to keep it together because they had nothing else. You see this with monarchies and dictatorships. In the absence of competition, you get spoilage. Again, Frederick Bastiat, you get spoilage. So everyone actually long-term hurts. Short-term, some people may think they're winning and they may live a short enough life to where they win. But long-term, the society hurts. So libertarianism at the local level. I'm not going to speak for you. I'm not on the campaign for what's her name, Jorgensen?
Joe Jorgensen, Mama Joe.
So, me and her don't rap. We don't double dutch together. So I can't speak on her like that.
Mm-hmm.
Local level. Libertarians often talk about we need to stop trying to win over existing Democrats or existing Republicans. We need to go for those people that are sick of both of them and try to get them on our side. So what does that look like? Let's go there. Right now, we got a lens. We got a lens here on Kenosha. We got a lens on a disparity. You've probably seen those videos. Black people saying, hey, you know what? Democrats nor Republicans take care of me. Never have been. Yeah, you're looking at us now, but this is my life years before these cameras came. And statistically, this will be my life years afterwards. So I don't think either of them are for me. I'm not falling for that no more.
Right.
What does Purge have for that person, that despondent citizen who's like, you know what? I'm tired of playing this game. I'm out. Bah.
For the person who says they're tired of playing the game, I'm out. I'm not sure that Purge would have much to say to them because they've made up their mind. Only thing that we could say is this system is here, and modifying the system is not insurmountable. There are about 75,000 citizens in the city of Racine, for instance. In the last election that had the most people participating was the 2018 gubernatorial race. 27,000 roughly people cast ballots in that election.
It's actually higher than I thought you were going to say, bro. That's 30%.
Well, but that's crazy because there are probably about 50,000 eligible voters in the city, or at least 40,000 eligible. That's not registered, but eligible, meaning that they can go and register, they can vote, blah, 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 blah. Okay? The mayor that so many people are dissatisfied with, he won his first term in 2017 during a special election in October of 2017. He garnered about 5,500 votes, close to 6,000 votes. Okay, 27,000 registered voters, probably 40 to 50,000 eligible voters. He got about 10 to 15% of the eligible voters put him into office. And as the time has worn on, fewer people are satisfied with him. The problem that we're having with that, for instance, is that people have been misinformed to believe that they just don't have the power. When it comes to our form of government, it requires corporate action, collective action. No matter how individualistic the people working together may be, the fact remains they have to work together corporately. And so it didn't change from 2017 to 2019. He ran unopposed officially in 2019, spring of 2019, but there was a write-in candidate, I believe her name is Sandy Widener. She got about 1,500 write-in votes to his approximately 6,000 votes. Okay. And I believe he only got that much because word got out that she was running a write-in campaign. Okay. So there's about 6,000 people in the city of Racine from 2017 to 2019 that can be
Decide
relied.
who the mayor is.
Yeah, that has decided who the mayor is. And so with Purge, we go to people, they make this complaint. The mayor does not listen to the wishes or the will of the people. First of all, you didn't make your will known. You didn't vote. But that's neither here nor there. We can't change the past. So going forward, what do we do? Well, if there are enough of you that believe he's not doing what he needs to do or what he's supposed to do, and that anyone else getting in there would probably suffer from the same problem, then you have something at your disposal to change that. One such thing is what is named in the statutes direct legislation. You draw up a proposed ordinance, you get 4,061 people to sign on the petition.
Why that number?
It's based on a number that's equal to 15% of the number of people who cast ballots in the last gubernatorial race. So
Okay.
15% of 27,068 is 4,061. Okay. And so that many people sign the petition. You hand the petition to the city clerk. The city clerk makes sure that all the enough signatures are there and that the proposed ordinance is in correct form. If all I's are dotted and T's are crossed as far as the signatures in the format of the petition, then the city clerk is duty bound statutorily to forward that petition to the common council. And the common council is duty bound to do one of two things. A, pass it into law unaltered, or if they decide not to do that, then they must call a binding referendum election where the people of the city get to decide whether or not that ordinance is passed as law. Either way, if it's passed into law, it cannot be vetoed by the mayor and it cannot be repealed by the common council for 2 years. So what if 4,061 people sign a petition that says no person shall be elected to mayor more than 2 times? They can't, there's term limits. No person
Okay.
can be elected to the common council from any district more than 4 times. So there's term limits. Because the terms are 2 years, they both, the mayor and people who are older persons, are limited to 8 years for their life. That's going to cause the common council to turn over at least every 8 years. You're getting fresh blood in there. Okay, there's that. What if 4,061 people sign onto an ordinance, a proposed ordinance that says the common council shall make no agreements or shall not approve any agreements between the mayor and a third party wherein the expenditure is more than $1 million or $500,000 or $250,000 or even $100,000? Now the people have to be consulted before the city starts spending its money. So if the mayor and the common council are all on board with something like that arena and hotel, Okay, Sheraton Hotel, and how many people do we know are going to be staying in the Sheraton Hotel in Racine? Probably people who are higher ups in government, but not the regular folks. Okay, how many people are going to be using that convention center? SC Johnson, Twin Disc, and their cronies, not the regular people, but we're on the hook for paying it to the tune of $21 million in the way of municipal bonds that when they mature, it becomes $30 million that our city ends up paying, or that the residents end up paying. But if there was that ordinance in place that you can't make any agreements wherein the expenditure is more than $100,000 without it first going to binding referendum, the people of the city who said they didn't want it vote in that referendum election, and it doesn't happen. They don't spend $40 million, or excuse me, $30 million on the police budget alone. You know, they don't spend $150,000 on a no bid contract to an IT company to run a website that looks worse than my WordPress website that I paid $48 for the whole year to host. Okay, you start ending all of these expenditures and making them come to light before they can go. What if there is an ordinance that you know that well, I'm, we'll just stick with those two. But there
No,
are,
those are good. Those are good.
what
So
if,
let me
yeah, what if
let me
there's,
a- so let me do this
okay,
because
go ahead.
I see we're coming up time for our people. So one last thought here
Mm-hmm,
for the non-libertarian local community. Okay,
mm-hmm,
and I'm gonna say something that they'll never admit.
mm-hmm,
On both sides of the aisle, the normal two sides,
um,
they both like free stuff, bro.
I know that
So I think they both get scared because
they won't get the free stuff.
they think that to join your crew, they're not going to get nothing. How do
Mm-hmm,
you convince them that no, I just won't take it from you to begin with?
mm-hmm.
When most people, to your point, they're not balling outrageous. I don't know Racine off the top of my head, but the per capita income here in Kenosha is 27,000.
It's low. It's a little lower in Racine.
So a family median family income is 54,000. So that family, they even if you let them keep all their 54,000, their effective tax rate is at a lower amount to where they feel it's a net gain. So
Well,
they
they get
don't
refundable credits. So instead of them only earning 54,000, with the refundable credits and all of their tax liability being reduced to zero, it goes from 54,000 to maybe 64,000 or 6,000. Because I've heard of people where they do their income tax return and they're getting $10,000-$15,000 back. Sometimes.
right.
Yeah.
So to that, which I'm not going to speak for Racine. I know for Kenosha, that's more than a few people.
Oh yeah.
So how do you tell them that yes, you might lose that, but big picture you get something better? Because I'll just talk about this in the what I'm not going to hear at the Black Barbershop, bro, is about the $31 million we're on the hook for through the tax. that's not what people are getting worked up that over at the barbershop. And
They're
let me
getting
not even
worked
say
up
that. I'm
over.
not even in the barbershop, but I know they're not talking about it. So
Yeah, they're
what do you
getting
say for
worked
them?
up over, okay. It comes down to, again, I have to repeat it, what's between the ears and behind the eyes. No, you don't get your plums and your goodies and different things like that. Um, but this is what is moral. And that's probably why someone like me, I would probably never win even a local election, no matter how many people say they support me. Okay, I ran for alderman twice. The first time I lost by 3 votes, only because the guy that I ran against, he was almost universally reviled by everyone except for the 70-something people that voted
Okay.
for him. Okay, and the voter turnout in the district was extremely low anyway. And even if I got on the council, I would have been one of maybe 2 or 3 individuals on the council, speaking made much difference. Okay, but again, we're dealing with human nature. Human nature is to take the easiest road to get to an end goal.
creatures of comfort.
So if the yes, creatures of comfort. And so if the easier way to get to the end goal is to, you know, get the refundable credits, you know, the tax returns, different things like that, they're going to go for that. You have very few people who are principled that will eschew the easier road because it is immoral. Um, you know, when it comes right down to it, those who cannot make it on their own, or they perceive they can't make it on their own, they will never go for libertarianism. Because if libertarianism is established, or better to the point, if libertarianism disestablishes what we see now, then they're going to be left in the lurch. Or at least they perceive they will be left in the lurch. You know, oh, I'm not going to get the 15 grand a year back in income tax returns. I don't like that. Skip all that. You know, never mind the fact that, you know, we end the war on drugs and you're not going to be pulled over by the police anymore. Never mind the fact that, you know, you can establish your own business.
Hold
And
up, that might be your sell. So could you say that? Could you
these
say,
are the things that I have said.
could you
Okay.
say, hey, here's the deal. The bad news, you lose that tax return check, the state part. The good news, no more cops hassling you over the drug war.
Mhm.
Choose.
And you've got some people who will say, I'd rather take my chances with the hassling than to give up that plum.
But at least they've said it. So, you know, my thing is,
And
at least
admit who you are. I agree with you. That is something that I appreciate and can respect to a certain degree. If don't speak to me in platitudes, making it seem as if though what you're talking about is altruistic and egalitarian, and you know, and whatever other euphemism that you want to use. Let's get right down to it. Okay? You would much rather see me victimized for your comfort than for you to go out there and work for it on your own. Period. I had this conversation with my pastor. Um, he got very uncomfortable when I started asking him pointed questions about, you know, the violence of the state in the form of the police coming after me with a gun. I said, say for instance, I owe $5,000 in taxes. You know, how far can the government go? And I just kept going to the next level, and the next level. And he kept saying, I'm not comfortable with that. Okay, then how do we counter that? Either the government has the right to do it, or they don't. Well, it's not that simple. Yes, it is. Either they have the right to tell me how much I should pay them, or they don't. There's no middle ground. And if people understand this, some people, many people, are afraid that if people understand this, what implications it means. Well, I'm a police officer. That means I don't get my 75 grand a year plus my $30,000 in fringe benefits and all this other stuff. I'm a fighter. You know, I don't get my, you know, 65,000 a year and get to live rent free and, you know, so on and so forth at the firehouse. Oh my God, I'm a street. You know, I work in the streets department. You mean to tell me that I would lose my job? Oh man, you know, I'm a developer. You mean to tell me there wouldn't be any apparatuses that I could get 20 and $30 million from, so that I could socialize the costs, but privatize the benefits and rewards of my venture capitalism? You know, people think these things. They may not say it outright,
they don't
but
articulate it that
they
way,
don't
but
articulate it
that's
that
basically
way,
what
and
you're
they
saying.
will speak in euphemisms and platitudes to try and hide it. But when you start questioning them, it starts coming out. And you know you've struck a nerve when they start hollering at you, calling you names, because you don't want people victimized. When you mess with people's money, that's when you have a problem. There was an individual in the city of Racine. He's the developer from Iowa, who was chosen to develop.
Oh, yeah.
What is that? The convention center and the hotel. I forget the guy's name, but myself and Dennis Monty cornered him during the break at the Common Council meeting in Racine. This was back in, I believe, March. And he made it a point to introduce himself to us because we had spoke during public comment, and I guess he figured he could talk slick and he'd be able to snowball us into thinking that what he's doing is really not all that bad. And so I started asking him questions. What is the success rate of this type of project? Have you done these kinds of projects? Oh yeah. What's the success rate? Oh, we've not have a failure. Okay, so the article that came out in Iowa, back in 2017, when you guys did this project and that project and this project, and they failed, does that not count against your success rate? He started sweating. Okay, so what if this project doesn't pan out? Who's left holding the bag for the $21 million that the city is floating in government bonds? Is your company going to repay the citizens of the city of Racine, or are we on the hook for yet another failed boondoggle? And we just asked him question after question after question. He finally said it. You know what? You guys are very, very smart, and I don't doubt that these things could happen, but I want to believe that they won't happen and that this will be successful. And because of that, that's why I support this.
Well, folks, I think you just heard it out there. It's on you, your money or your life.
That's your past or your future, your money or your life, your past or your future. Yeah.
Well, let me say this, Mr. Platt. Thank you for talking with me. We got to do this again because I think these are one of those conversations that people hear about, and they have conversations about the conversation, but people don't actually hear these conversations. So definitely going to need to have you back. Thanks for rapping with me on libertarianism, African Americans and African Americans with libertarianism.
Yes.
Oh, one more time. The people want to get at you. Tell them how they find you.
Okay. So again, I'm Mac Platt. I am on Facebook under the same name, Mac Platt. The organization that I'm a part of is called People United for Responsible Government Incorporated. Those initials spell out PURG. We pronounce it purge. One of the things we like to say is we want to purge City Hall. Our organization is online at www.purgpac.org or purgepac.org. There, you can send us a contact email. You can contact me directly. My email is listed on the website, and I'll say it here. My email is mac.platt@purgepac.org. You can call me at 262-676-2971. That number has been public knowledge for about the last 10 years. Comes right to my cell phone, right here. And if you believe that we can make a difference, even if we don't turn our cities in southeastern Wisconsin into libertarian bastions of freedom, we can make them much better than what they are. If you believe we can do that by banding together with corporate action, join together with us as a member of our political action committee. There's strength in numbers, and our superseding principle is individually we're like raindrops, but together we're like the ocean. And I stole that myself. I taxed that.
All right, sir. Well, thank you again for coming on and rapping with me. I know these things are always kind of like, well, what am I walking into? So I appreciate you taking the chance with me, and you enjoy the rest of your day. Everyone listening, this will be posted up. You got any other questions? You know how to find the man, and looking forward to your feedback. Peace.
Peace.